and Water, as well as the National Coalition for Natural Farming. I am pleased to welcome you all to this webinar called From Crisis to Opportunities, India's Strategic Pathway to Reduce Fertiliser Dependence. आज आप सभी का स्वागत है CEW और NCNF की तरफ से। मैं आप सबको आज के पैनल आपदा में अवसर रासायनिक खाद पर निर्भरता कम करने की भारत की रणनीतियों में स्वागत करना चाहती हूँ। The Council on Energy, Environment and Water is a homegrown policy research institution based in New Delhi, working on energy, environment, and development challenges using data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach. And NCNF is a collaborative platform advancing agroecology-based farming by bringing together practitioners, researchers, and policymakers to strengthen farmer-led innovations and policy discourse. CEW एक नीति पर विचार करने वाले भारतीय संस्था है जो ऊर्जा, पर्यावरण और विकास पर काम करती है, और NCNF एक सहयोग संचालित मंच है जो पर्यावरण संगत खेती को बढ़ावा देने के लिए अलग-अलग स्टेकहोल्डर्स को जोड़ती है. Today, for you, we've brought together a panel that cuts across science, policy, and practice, and we're joined by Dr. N. Raghuram, Dr. Sudha Narayan, Dr. Narasimha Reddy, and Mr. Nachiket Udupa, who will be bridging narratives across the ecosystem for a holistic understanding of this space. And the discussion today will be moderated by Mr. Apurv Khandelwal, Fellow at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water. आज का पैनल विज्ञान, नीति और जमीनी अनुभव को साथ लाता है, और इसकी मॉडरेशन CEW के फेलो अपूर्व खड्डेलवाल करेंगे. So, what is the goal for today's session? We're aiming to move beyond treating fertilizer as a short-term supply issue and risk, and really ask, what does it take to reduce structural dependence without compromising on food securities and livelihoods? हम सिर्फ आज एक सप्लाई के मुद्दे पर नहीं रुकना चाहते, बल्कि ये समझना चाहते हैं कि रसायन पर निर्भरता को व्यवस्था की जड़ों से कैसे कम किया जा सके. So, in today's panel, we'll be moving in three parts. First, we'll be diagnosing what's actually going wrong, what immediate actions can we take, and what a real transition would require from a root perspective. हमारी पैनल की बातचीत को हमने 3 हिस्सों में रखा है. पहले कि असली समस्या क्या है, दूसरी कि तात्कालीन समय में क्या करना है, और तीसरा कि लंबे समय का बदलाव कैसे लाया जा सकता है. जिससे पहले हम पैनल और मॉडरेशन में आगे बढ़े, I would like to set some housekeeping rules so that we can make the best of the space today. So first of all, I would request that all participants please keep their microphones muted. If you have any questions or reflections, please add them in the chat and we will track them for the panel. Session will be in English and Hindi, and captions will be available in Zoom. Please keep your questions brief so panelists can respond effectively. Audience से निवेदन है कि अपने माइक को म्यूट पर रखें, अपने सवाल और विचार चैट में डालें और संक्षिप्त रखें. सेशन हिंदी और अंग्रेजी दोनों में होगा. अब मैं इंट्रो में जाऊंगी थोड़ा कॉन्टेक्स्ट सेट करने के लिए, पर उससे पहले हम एक तस्वीर लेना चाहेंगे सारे पैनलिस्ट एंड ऑडियंस के साथ. सो आपके 2-3 मिनट के लिए आपका पेशेंस वुड बी अप्रिशिएटेड. Before I move on to the context setting, we just want to take a quick picture to celebrate everyone who is joining us on this journey and discussion. So would really appreciate your patience for the next 2-3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Are we taking picture?
Yeah, and in so I would request all the participants to turn on their videos as possible. क्योंकि हम अब एक तस्वीर लेने वाले हैं, मैं सबसे यही रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी पार्टिसिपेंट से भी कि वो अपना वीडियो ऑन करे ताकि हम सबके चेहरे देख सके और तस्वीर में रिकॉर्ड कर सके. थैंक यू सो मच.
And also team, can you join us?
Yeah, and I also request the CEW team to also come behind us for this picture. Lovely to see so many faces joining us here today.
सभी को नमस्कार और हार्दिक अभिवादन जुड़ने के लिए।
Got it.
Oh, it says 2 people entered the waiting room.
Um,
Ask करके one more.
एक बार
One
दोबारा
more.
ले लें।
एक बार दोबारा हम all right.
Perfect.
Perfect.
बहुत
Perfect.
धन्यवाद।
Thank you everyone for your patience. Really appreciate it. We can. Okay. I'll now use a few slides to quickly set the context and anchor the discussion before we bring in our panelists and the moderation panel that we have planned. अब मैं कुछ 3-4 स्लाइड्स आपके साथ शेयर करूंगी ताकि हम इस कॉन्वर्जेशन का इंट्रोडक्शन दे सके. Thank you so much. Move to the next slide, please. Can we move to the next? Yeah. So let me start with where we are now. India is facing an immediate fertilizer shock, but also a long-term dependence channel, often framed as supply issues, shortages, price volatility, and import dependence, and sometimes implicitly blaming on farmer overuse. But the pattern that we are seeing across different disruptions, be it through COVID, through Russia-Ukraine incursion, through the current West Asia challenges, our responses tend to be around import more, subsidize more, and stabilize. ये एक तात्कालीन और वास्तविक संकट है जिसका प्रभाव सीधा किसानों पर पड़ रहा है, पर हम ये भी जानते हैं कि लंबे समय से चल रही रसायन और निर्भरता बस सप्लाई की कमी और आयात की समस्या नहीं है, ना ही ये केवल किसानों द्वारा खाद के अत्यधिक इस्तेमाल की समस्या है. Thank you. But as we take a step back, we see that the pattern is consistent. Every shock triggers the same response. We import more, we subsidize more to stabilize the crisis. This tells us two things. First, this is not just a supply disruption. हर झटके के बाद एक ही जवाब आता है, आयात बढ़ाओ, सब्सिडी बढ़ाओ, सिस्टम को चलाए रखो. इसका मतलब ये है कि व्यवस्था के निहित की निर्भरता है. This is also why this is not just a farmer behavioral problem. Farmers aren't just overusing because of poor decisions, but they are responding to the incentives that the system is showing. Rising debt burden, the kind of inputs that the subsidy is subsidizing, the kind of crops that the procurement system rewards, and also limited access to all alternatives. So what we call as overuse is actually a result of these incentives. So if the incentives don't change, the behavior won't change as well. किसान सीधा गलत फैसला नहीं ले रहे, वो सिस्टम के कारकों के हिसाब से सही फैसला ले रहे हैं. बढ़ता कर्ज, सब्सिडी से मिलती खाद, मिट्टी और बीज की गिरती उत्पादकता, मार्केट की डिमांड और जैविक खाद के बढ़ते अभाव में किसान अपना फैसला लेते हैं. जब तक ये कारण नहीं बदलेंगे, व्यवहार भी नहीं बदलेगा. Can we move on to the next one? So what makes this moment important is not just the crisis, but how we respond to it, and the reason why we brought this conversation to the fore. Because responses are never neutral. They do not just solve immediate problems, they also shape the future of the system. Some responses can help us through the system by stabilizing it. Some responses end up reinforcing the lock-ins that we see today. And some begin to lose those lock-ins and enable a more structural transition, right? So we can, to think about it more practically, some are incremental, positive in the sense that they provide immediate relief, and some are incremental. They can have unintended consequences that make future transitions harder, and some are transformative, right? The response choices that we make today that can lay groundwork for agroecology and alternatives. So हर आपदा की रणनीति निष्पक्ष नहीं होती. कुछ रणनीतियां केवल समस्या का क्षणिक समाधान करती हैं, कुछ निर्भरता को बढ़ाती हैं, पर कुछ रणनीतियां ऐसी होती हैं जो प्रोत्साहन को बढ़ावा देकर रूपांतरण की शुरुआत करती हैं. सो ज़रूरी सवाल सिर्फ ये नहीं कि अभी क्या मुमकिन है, पर ये है कि हमारी रणनीति में हमें किस दिशा में जाना चाहते हैं हम. So for this, we wanted to think about how can we respond in the current moment that doesn't continue this cycle of dependence, but actually allows for long-term transition, right? What can be incremental actions that don't get us into a lock-in, but can actually feed into long-term resilience? आज का सिस्टम खाद की इनपुट पर निर्भर है, और आपदा के समय पे हम जो रणनीतियां बना लेते हैं वो कई बार अभी की प्रणाली को और भी जटिल बना देती हैं. सो अभी बिजनेस एज यूजुअल रिस्पॉन्सेज होते हैं जो अभी के लिए सिस्टम को स्टेबलाइज कर दे, माना वाया ब्लैंकेट इम्पोर्ट्स, इनपुट सब्स्टिट्यूशन विदाउट डाइवर्सिफिकेशन, बट they do not lead into long-term resilience. What we are trying to unpack is what could a good increment be, which is the blue line, right? What are the actions today and also in the near future that can help us transition into the green space that we are seeing, which is transformative, right? More autonomous, more agroecological. आज की ऐसी क्या एक्शंस हैं जो हम ले सकते हैं जो हमें ट्रांजिशन की तरफ ले जा सके, एग्रो इकोलॉजी की तरफ ले जा सके. एंड आज का पैनल ये ही हमको समझने में मदद करेगा. जो हमने आपको ग्राफ दिखाया है, the graph that we're showing you today is just an illustrative way for us to think about different pathways that we can take. ये बस एक तरीका है हमारे लिए सोचने के लिए कि हम ये जो बाइनरी होती है इंक्रीमेंट वर्सेस ट्रांसफॉर्म की ऑप्टिमाइजेशन करे, इनपुट सब्स्टिट्यूशन करे, इंपोर्ट बढ़ाए और क्रॉप डाइवर्सिफिकेशन करे, इसको हम कैसे साथ में निकाल सकते हैं. एंड इसके साथ मैं अब अपूर्व से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वो पैनल की शुरुआत करे. And with this brief context, I will request Apurv and the panel to come in with their insights. Please be rest assured that we'll be unpacking this more with the panel, and this is just first of many conversations. And we're already looking forward to having your reflections, not just in the chat, but also afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhamini, for setting the context. इसके आगे की कार्यवाही मैं इंग्लिश में करूँगा बिकॉज समय कम है. हर शब्द, हर वाक्य को ट्रांसलेट करना मुश्किल होगा. द रेस्ट ऑफ द कॉन्वर्जेशन आई विल ट्राई टू ड्राइव इन इंग्लिश. अ मिक्स ऑफ बोथ विल बी डिफिकल्ट टू ट्रांसलेट ईच वर्ड एंड ईच सेंटेंस. सो जो कॉन्टेक्स्ट सेटिंग अभी भामिनी ने किया वो डेफिनेटली शोज अ वेरी अनकंफर्टेबल पिक्चर. In essence, India is at risk of misdiagnosis. हम कहीं प्रॉब्लम को गलत ना समझ लें, is the risk we are looking at. हर बार जब कोई जियोपॉलिटिकल रिस्क होता है, कोई शॉक होता है, every time price spike happens globally, every time shipping disruption happens globally, हमेशा एग्रीकल्चर एकाएक एंड इसकी फूड सिक्योरिटी एकाएक रिस्क में आ जाती है, फर्टिलाइजर सिक्योरिटी रिस्क में आ जाती है. और ये एक पैटर्न की तरह हम देख रहे हैं. यूक्रेन रशिया वॉर जब रिसेंटली एस्केलेट हुआ, उसके बाद अभी ये नया वॉर एंड इट कंटिन्यूज. सो जब कोई चीज बार बार हो रही है, इसका कारण है कि इसके पीछे कोई स्ट्रक्चरल, कोई रचनात्मक, नॉट रचनात्मक, कोई संरचना में इशू है, और वहां पर हमें डायग्नोज करना है कि क्या रचनात्मक इशू है। जो इतना स्ट्रॉन्ग डिपेंडेंस ऑन फर्टिलाइजर है वो अपस्ट्रीम लिंक्ड है एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी और नेशनल गैस सिक्योरिटी के साथ। जब भी यहां पर इशू आता है सीधा सीधा फर्टिलाइजर में इशू आ जाता है। सेकंड, डाउनस्ट्रीम वो एकाएक फर्टिलाइजर में कोई इशू आता है, वो फिजिकल स्टेबिलिटी और फूड सिक्योरिटी को इंपैक्ट करने लगता है, और बहुत ही स्क्यूड एक्सपोजर है, बहुत ही एक्सट्रीम एक्सपोजर है फर्टिलाइजर का एकाएक हमारी फूड सिक्योरिटी के साथ। सो प्रश्न ये है कि ये क्या एक सप्लाई चेन मैनेजमेंट इशू है, ये सिर्फ एक फर्टिलाइजर अवेलेबिलिटी इशू है, या ये एक स्ट्रक्चरल इशू है, एक संरचना में इशू है कि हम ओवर डिपेंडेंट हैं फर्टिलाइजर पर अपनी फूड सिक्योरिटी के लिए। और इसलिए प्रश्न ये है कि किस तरह से इस फर्टिलाइजर डिपेंडेंस को सॉल्व किया जाए, ना ही सिर्फ इसकी अवेलेबिलिटी को शॉर्ट टर्म में सॉल्व किया जाए। तो ये फ्रेमिंग है इस पैनल का, और 4 इंपॉर्टेंट पैनलिस्ट ने हमें आज ज्वाइन किया है। मैं क्विकली उनको इंट्रोड्यूस करवाता हूं। वी आर ज्वाइंड फर्स्ट बाय डॉक्टर एन रघुराम। सर, इफ यू कुड हाईलाइट, sort of wave your hand for everybody to recognize. Professor Raghuram is professor and head of Center for Sustainable Nitrogen and Nutrient Management at Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University. He works extensively on nitrogen management, nutrient efficiency, and soil health, and has been closely involved in linking science to fertilizer and nutrient policy. दूसरा हमारे साथ जुड़ रही हैं डॉक्टर सुधा नारायणन। वो सीनियर रिसर्च फेलो हैं एट इफ्प्री, इंटरनेशनल फूड पॉलिसी रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट, और उनका काम फोकस करता रहा है एग्रीकल्चर पॉलिसी, इंस्टीट्यूशंस एंड पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर रिफॉर्म्स पर। हमारे साथ और साथ में जुड़ रहे हैं डॉक्टर नरसिम्हा रेड्डी दोंती। वो एडवाइजर हैं एट सेंटर फॉर अर्थ लीडरशिप एंड सस्टेनेबिलिटी। वो काम करते रहे एग्रीकल्चर ट्रांजिशंस पे, ऑर्गेनिक एंड नेचुरल फार्मिंग और ब्रॉडर स्ट्रक्चरल इश्यूज इन इंडियन एग्रीकल्चर पर। और चौथा हमारे साथ जुड़ रहे हैं मिस्टर नचिकेत उडुपा। वो मजदूर किसान शक्ति संगठन से जुड़े रहे हैं, और उनका काम क्लोजली फोकसेस ऑन farmers and institutions across multiple states, and he will bring a perspective on structural dependence जो है सिस्टम में, incremental reforms क्या possible हैं, और transition pathways किस तरह की हो सकते हैं। सभी पैनलिस्ट्स को पुनः धन्यवाद for joining us today। कुछ ग्राउंड रूल्स में दोबारा से ध्यान में दिला देता हूं, हालांकि भामिनी ने ध्यान में दिलाए हैं। और सीक्वेंस 3 भागों में ये पैनल हमने डिवाइड किया है। पहले में हम डायग्नोज करेंगे कि विषय आखिर प्रॉब्लम कहां पर है, दूसरा शॉर्ट टर्म में क्या किया जा सकता है उस पर, और तीसरा लॉन्ग टर्म में क्या ट्रांजिशन पाथवे होगा। पहला थोड़ा सा छोटा सेक्शन होगा, अराउंड 15 मिनट का, उसके बाद लगभग 30 से 40 मिनट के दोनों सेक्शन होंगे। हर राउंड में एक राउंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस होगा, और फिर हम डिस्कशन करेंगे आपस में पैनलिस्ट के साथ, और जो क्वेश्चंस या सजेशंस होंगे पार्टिसिपेंट्स के उनको लेंगे। सभी पार्टिसिपेंट से अनुरोध है कि वो साथ में जब डिस्कशन चल रहा है तो अपने प्रश्न और अपने सुझाव देते रहें। जस्ट अ मिनट, अपने सुझाव देते रहें लगातार। टीम यहाँ पे उनको सिंथेसाइज करेगी और हमें प्रस्तुत करेगी ताकि डिस्कशन में उनको लाया जा सके। पैनलिस्ट से आज्ञा चाहूंगा कि दे अलाउ मी टू इंटरवीन इन ड्यूरिंग द कन्वर्सेशन टू मैनेज द टाइम। पहले सेशन में लगभग 2 मिनट, लगभग 2 से 3 मिनट सभी पैनलिस्ट के पास होंगे, और बाकी हर सेक्शन में लगभग 5 मिनट का समय हमारे हर एक पैनलिस्ट को उस प्रश्न के लिए अवेलेबल रहेगा। डिस्कशन जो भी पैनलिस्ट हिंदी और इंग्लिश दोनों को मिक्स कर पाए ज्यादा अच्छा रहेगा, ताकि सभी साथी ऑनलाइन समझ पाए। जो नहीं कर सकते हैं इट्स ओके, मैं बीच बीच में सिंथेसिस करूंगा हिंदी में ताकि सभी तक जानकारी पहुंच पाए। मैं अपनी टीम से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि यदि हम समय ऊपर नीचे कर रहे हो तो प्लीज एक्टिवली कम इन सो वी कैन मैनेज द टाइम। एंड पैनलिस्ट से एक आखिरी रिक्वेस्ट है कि यदि जब आप उत्तर दे रहे हैं और आपको एक फेलो पैनलिस्ट के किसी विषय पर कुछ रिस्पॉन्ड करना है, वो आप उसको इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं, ताकि एक सीक्वेंशियल डिस्कशन ना बने, एक इमर्जेंट कॉन्वर्जेशन की तरह निकल कर आए। चलिए शुरू करते हैं अपने आज के पैनल को। पहला विषय जो डायग्नोसिस का है, और जैसे मैंने फ्रेम किया कि प्रॉब्लम कहाँ है, एक सप्लाई मैनेजमेंट प्रॉब्लम है या ये एक्चुअली एक स्ट्रक्चरल इशू है ओवर डिपेंडेंस ऑन फर्टिलाइजर पर, जिस पर हमें फोकस करना चाहिए। मैं अनुरोध करूंगा हमारे पैनलिस्ट नचिकेत उडुपा जी से पहले आपसे बातचीत शुरू करते हैं। नचिकेत, आप काफी समय से ये इश्यूज ट्रैक करते रहे हैं। जब कोविड हुआ था तब भी इसी तरह के इश्यूज हुए थे, इसके बाद अभी यूक्रेन के समय पे इसी तरह के इश्यूज हुए। ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन डिस्टर्ब होती है, उसके बाद एक फर्टिलाइजर क्राइसिस भारत पे आ जाता है, फिर फूड सिक्योरिटी का क्राइसिस आ जाता है। ये शॉक्स बहुत ही रियल हैं डेफिनेटली, पर उससे भी ज्यादा अनफॉर्चुनेटली है कि जब ये शॉक्स होते हैं इनका इम्पैक्ट ओवर एम्पलीफाइड है हमारे फूड सिस्टम्स पे, हमारे एग्रीकल्चर पर। तो कहीं ना कहीं कोई स्ट्रक्चरल इशू लगता है। इन योर ओपिनियन, व्हाट आर द की स्ट्रक्चरल फीचर्स दैट मेक अस पर्टिकुलरली वल्नरेबल? आपके समझ में कौन से ऐसे रचना में इश्यूज हैं सिस्टम की, हमारी व्यवस्था में इश्यूज हैं जो हमें वल्नरेबल बना देते हैं, इन इम्पैक्ट्स को इतना एम्पलीफाइड कर देते हैं हमारे फूड सिस्टम पर? पास्ट में इस पर कोई रिफॉर्म किया गया है, कोई एफर्ट किया गया है क्या? एंड वो पास्ट रिफॉर्म क्या ये पैटर्न शिफ्ट कर पाए हैं या नहीं कर पाए हैं? नचिकेत।
हाँ, सभी को नमस्ते। तो इसका अगर एक स्ट्रक्चरल रूप में देखना है कि दिक्कत कहाँ आ रही है, तो थोड़ा इतिहास में जाना पड़ेगा कि ये पूरा जो ढांचा बिठाया गया है उर्वरक का, फर्टिलाइजर का और उसका सब्सिडी का, तो वो कहाँ से आया, क्यों आया। तो ये 60-70 के दशक में जब इंडिया में फूड सिक्योरिटी का प्रॉब्लम था, इंदिरा गांधी थी प्राइम मिनिस्टर, तो उस वक्त हमें खाना इंपोर्ट करना पड़ा, अनाज इंपोर्ट करना पड़ा। और तब एक सिनारियो था जिसको अंग्रेजी में शिप टू माउथ कहते हैं, कि खाना जहाज से आ रहा था और उसको हम खा रहे थे। तो तब एक खाद्य सुरक्षा के नजरिए से, फ्रॉम अ फूड सिक्योरिटी पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, इट वाज इम्पोर्टेंट दैट इंडिया इज फुल फूड सेल्फ सफिशिएंट, दैट वी आर ग्रोइंग इनफ फूड फॉर आवरसेल्व्स। तो तब ये माना गया कि हमें उतना, कम से कम उतना अनाज तो उगाना चाहिए ताकि हम, जितनी जनता है देश में, उतने लोगों को हम खिला पाएं। तो तब हरित क्रांति आई एंड दिस होल ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन स्टार्टेड। एंड ये पूरा फर्टिलाइजर भी जो शुरू हुआ है वहीं से शुरू हुआ है। तो तब हरित क्रांति में कुछ तरीके के बीज लाए गए और उन बीज तभी पर्याप्त उपज दे पाएंगे जब उनको उतना फर्टिलाइजर दिया जाएगा। सो द सीड्स दैट केम ड्यूरिंग द ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन आर द काइंड दैट दे विल नॉट गिव यू इनफ यील्ड अनलेस यू पुट दैट फर्टिलाइजर। एंड इसी वजह से ये पूरा फर्टिलाइजर का सप्लाई, उसके लिए सब्सिडी, उसका प्रमोशन, ये सब किया गया। तो अभी अगर देखा जाए तो जितना, अगर मोटा रूप से देखें कि व्हाट आर द मेन फर्टिलाइजर्स दैट और मेन न्यूट्रिएंट्स वी नीड, that we add to the soil, apart from of course what is there, air and water etc. So they are NPK, नाइट्रोजन, फॉस्फोरस, पोटैश। तो जैसे अगर हम अपने खाने में देखें तो जैसे प्रोटीन्स, कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स, मिनरल्स, विटामिन वगैरह चाहिए, तो वैसे अगर क्रॉप न्यूट्रिशन में समझना है तो मोटा मोटा एनपीके, नाइट्रोजन, फॉस्फोरस, पोटैश। और इसमें लगभग 100% पोटैश हमें इंपोर्ट करना पड़ता है, 90% फॉस्फोरस इंपोर्ट करना पड़ता है, यानी फॉस्फेटिक फर्टिलाइजर जो ऑलरेडी बनाया गया है। सो वी आर इंपोर्टिंग डीएपी, एनपीके, वेरियस ग्रेड्स एक्सेट्रा, और वी आर इंपोर्टिंग द रॉ मटेरियल, यूजुअली फॉस्फोरिक एसिड। तो मैं दोनों को जोड़ रहा हूँ। नॉर्मली दे ओनली टॉक अबाउट फर्टिलाइजर इंपोर्ट एज ओनली फिनिश्ड गुड इंपोर्ट, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट फिनिश्ड गुड इंपोर्ट एज वेल एज रॉ मटेरियल इंपोर्ट। तो वैसे देखें तो फॉस्फोरस में अबाउट 90% डिपेंडेंस इज देयर ऑन इंपोर्ट्स। And ऐसे ही even for nitrogen we have about 70% dependence on imports. Again, I'm including both imported urea as well as where you have to import the feedstock, natural gas. तो इस तरीके से देखें तो जो पहला मतलब the original problem that we were trying to solve, that we were import dependent, structurally that import dependence has not gone. Earlier ships were coming with food, now ships are coming with fertilizer. Earlier it was ship to mouth, now it is ship to farm to mouth. So in terms of our food security, that removing import dependence has not gone. We have just changed the import dependence from food to fertilizer. So structurally I would say कि उस वक्त का जो solution था overall हरित क्रांति का, उस solution में ही एक बुनियादी दिक्कत है कि वो import dependence को हटाया नहीं. क्या import हो रहा है उसको बदला है बस. एंड कमिंग टू द सेकंड क्वेश्चन क्विकली कि जो क्या रिफॉर्म किया गया और उसमें बदलाव क्यों नहीं हुआ है, वो इसलिए कि हाँ अलग अलग तरीके के रिफॉर्म किए गए हैं. पहले जैसे अभी भी यूरिया का एक फ्लैट सब्सिडाइज्ड रेट है, पहले बाकी ग्रेड्स में भी था, अभी बाकी ग्रेड्स को एक न्यूट्रिएंट बेस्ड सब्सिडी में लाया.
नचिकेत, you'll have to wrap it up in 30 seconds.
सेकेंड्स, यस. तो इस तरीके से जो फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी में जो रिफॉर्म लाया गया है उतना ही किया गया है, बट द फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लम इज our dependence on fertilizer. The fundamental problem is not the subsidy, and the problem is that government is trying to reduce subsidy. It is not trying to do away with fertilizer import dependence. That is the fundamental problem why earlier reforms have failed. So I'll stop here. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Team, please keep me unmuted actively. So thank you for clearly framing how we have moved from ship to food to ship to fertilizer. And we have simply moved the problem from one root cause to another. And the reforms have been focused on mostly on subsidy, but not on acting or reducing fertilizer dependence, which is a new problem. Thank you. With that, let me come to Dr. Donti. Dr. Donti, in your recent letter to Agriculture Minister, you have warned of multiple simultaneous crises before Kharif 2026. Can you share with the audience whether these crises are amplifying each other and potentially give a quick glimpse of what these crises that you are mentioning about and what evidence shows farmers will actually feel this crisis and when? प्लीज डॉक्टर दोंती, एक बार मैं हिंदी में प्रश्न दोबारा से साथियों के लिए रख देता हूं. डॉक्टर दोंती ने एक रीसेंट लेटर एग्रीकल्चर मिनिस्टर को लिखा था जिसमें उन्होंने बोला है कि मल्टीपल क्राइसिस साथ में होने वाले हैं. वो कब होने वाले हैं, कैसे होंगे हमारे फार्मर्स को, कब उनका इम्पैक्ट फील होगा, और वो आपस में वो क्राइसिस कैसे एक दूसरे को बढ़ावा दे रहे हैं. डॉक्टर दोंती, प्लीज.
Yeah, basically, I wrote that letter on March 10th, immediately after natural gas reservation order was issued by the government of India. So at that time, I refer to four kinds of crises which are developing, which are already, the signs of that crisis are there. And now they are obvious. One is the fertilizer shortage, which is going to hit Indian agriculture in the coming Kharif, and probably it is going to go up to Rabi also. So that I think is obvious now. And even today, government does not admit it clearly. But they also mentioned there is a 25 to 30% of fertilizer shortage already, and it can go up to 50 to 60% shortage. And that means, as Nachiket was mentioning, we are now in the last 60 years, we became dependent on fertilizer for our food grain production. And farmers have been in a crisis. Last year, we have seen, even without a war, some 10 to 50% shortage, and there were long lines in several states, including Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and many other states. There were lathi charges. So farmers were clearly in a crisis at that time, and this is going to become a serious crisis in coming currently. The second is the fuel inflation, which we have already seen in the last 1 month, where fuel shortages have been reported across India. Costs have gone up, and that has led to food inflation as well. Third is, which is not noticed much, is cooking oil. We are dependent on imported cooking oils, and for various reasons, again, shortages have cropped up, and the prices of cooking oil has gone up by 20-30%. The
Uh,
fourth issue,
yeah, please,
uh,
Professor Donti, हमारे पास अभी no, we have now 30 seconds. You'll have to wrap up, but also give a sense of when do you think these no these are also going to hit in your opinion. Please continue.
this should have been addressed by now. What I would like to tell in the 30 seconds is our government is, even today, is dependent on half lies or half truths and full lies. In case, I just want to use, I'm tempted to use the word, it is a policy jihad which the government is pursuing. And I don't know why that's happening, but we can again discuss what are the forces behind that policy jihad, which is continuing even now when the crisis is apparent and very clear. Now, the fourth issue is which bigger issue is the food security is under threat. So we are importing pulses, and just yesterday, government has given a open policy for importing tur from other countries for until next year. So we are openly saying we will import more food, even while our food production is under crisis because of shortage and also because of lack of prices for the farmers. So there are, reinforcing issues within this, but government is apparently not even taking cognizance of even the, visible crisis. And that's a problem
Thank
which
you.
I want
Thank
to
you.
refer.
I think that fourth point is an important one. This policy coherence seem to be missing. But let's move to the next one. Dr. Raghuram, I would want to come to you. Beyond the immediate war-driven shortages, there is a silent crisis of depleted soils and policy lock-ins, where soil and its nutrient vitality are sidelined. It also talks to briefly what the fourth crisis that Dr. Donti was talking about. How do we solve for input access, which is a real problem, while avoiding the misdiagnosis that we have been talking about in the conversation till now? Dr. Raghuram.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with the comments made by Nachiket and Dr. Donti. Just to put it in the context, our discussion about the crisis for food security or Indian agriculture in terms of fertilizer dependence or natural gas dependence itself is only a small part of the wider agrarian crisis that India is going through. So there is a wider agrarian crisis about land relations, about farming systems, about input output, about value for remunerative value for farmers' output. In fact, we even have a crisis on defining who is a farmer. Most farmers are landowners who don't want to cultivate. Their absentee landlordism is rampant, and most policies addressing farmers, whether it is loans or insurance or others or subsidies, they're actually benefiting the landowners than the practicing farmers. So these are also structural issues where if we can't even define who the farmer is, there is a much bigger structural issue. But coming back to the more specific questions that are raised today, the continuing on what Nachiket has said, Green Revolution brought a certain set of practices. Yes, fertilizer dependence was a part of it, but it was also trying to increase the productivity through, mechanized farming or reducing the height to remove lodging, increase yield. There are lots of other things that came. But I know as a biologist that the particular gene and the allele that was used, SD1, that was used for these dwarf high yielding varieties, is also, now it is established that it is also responsible for low fertilizer response. SD1 allele is actually responsible for low fertilizer response. So it asks for more fertilizer to give you the yield. And most of the time, all the crop improvement programs under the Green Revolution focused on input-output relationship without understanding the underlying efficiency parameter. So if you increase 50 kg fertilizer, 50% fertilizer, and got 10% higher yield, you celebrate it. You didn't worry about wastage of 40% fertilizer. So most of what we call better varieties are responsive to disproportionately high inputs. Not only fertilizer, it's also water, it's also other inputs. So input efficiency was never a part of the design of crop improvement programs globally. Only in the last 1 or 2 decades, this has become realized, and in the developed countries, they are moving towards screening crop germplasm for less water, less fertilizer, and other less inputs. So that is a huge systemic shift that even the science setup has to make. Now, that's not the only thing. Fertilizer dependence is only as far as crops is concerned. But crops are a part of a cropping system. Which crops you grow and which is subsidized, which is not, which gets a MSP, which doesn't, is also driving a skewed production system of certain crops over others. And crops are a part of a wider farming system where there is livestock, there is poultry, there is fisheries. Traditionally, in natural farming, they were all a part of a integrated farming system where plant animal farming was together. The economic models have diverged. Crop farmers don't keep livestock.
We
Livestock
around
farmers
have 30 seconds,
animal
Dr.
grow
Raghuram,
crop.
just nudging you.
That's the wider problem. So we are now stuck in this. There are many structural things that have happened over the years. We interpreted Green Revolution as cereal revolution, whereas the whole world did not do so. Even Mexico and US, from where these techniques came, they still have 40-60 ratio of legumes to cereals. That itself is hugely responsible for the fertilizer trap that we are in. Our legume production has stagnated or gone down. Our cereal production have gone up.
Understood.
We supply 40% of the world cereal while supplying 80% of the Indian population with free cereal under Prime Minister's Yojana. So that means most of what we are exporting is not because we have fed our stomachs. We are exporting because what we are producing is not even affordable to our own people. So there are many structural issues to be addressed, and fertilizer is just a part of it. Fertilizer Mukt Bharat is possible. If you want to do it, may not be entirely, but moving in the direction is possible.
Pardon me for cutting in, but indeed, seeds, not just seeds, cropping system, and the policy design issues around coherence, targeting, inclusion, all of that is together taking us into the soup. Now, moving to Dr. Sudha Narayan, your research highlights a subsidy syndrome in India's fertilizer system. Could you briefly tell a bit more about it, particularly where exactly are the blockages to shifting towards sustainable practices, particularly which of these can be realistically fixed in short term, in your opinion?
I'll focus on the first part of your question.
Okay, that's a wise choice for 3 minutes, yes.
Yeah, it's diagnostics, so I'll focus on the diagnosis. I think one clarification I want to make whenever we talk about fertilizer policy is the difference between prioritizing reducing fertilizer import dependence and reducing fertilizer dependence. Now, if you look at policy debates in India, the last 30-40 years, we've had a group that focuses on reducing import dependence, focusing on supply chain, where we get our feedstock from, and so on. And technological innovations that reduce our dependence on imports of fertilizer or raw materials. So these have, and the other is the one that questions what is the role of fertilizer in the system. And in a way, that's what Professor Raghuram was mentioning, and Nachiket also alluded to a little bit. And these two have been operated in silos. Nobody talks to each other, and that I think is a problem, because I think it's an opportune moment to bring these discussions together. So that is one. The second thing is a fact that we see across sectors in India is that we are able to put policies in place, but we have never been very successful in removing them. And I think that is the biggest problem we face with regard to fertilizer. Nachiket already gave a bit of the history, but if you look at how the fertilizer subsidy, in particular the urea retention pricing scheme came, it came in 1977 in response to the oil price shock of the early 1970s. And so here we are facing again another shock, again an oil price shock, but we haven't moved significantly away from it, because all of our reforms since 1997, Hanumantarao committee said reform fertilizer subsidy regime for various problems that I can discuss later. We've only made incremental changes, which is more of the same and not really moved far away. So over time, the system has got entrenched. So I think these are the two big policy issues we face, but I can elaborate later on. Back to you.
Thank you for really highlighting. So I think the first three panelists did identify the diagnosis, like where the problems are in the system. What I see, you're really identifying the risk of misdiagnosis. It's important to nuance out between fertilizer dependence and import dependence of fertilizer. And second, that let's not get into those levers that we cannot reverse in future, like subsidies and newer kind of subsidies, etc.
If I could just add one more, just to make it conversational. I think when you started post the question on whether it's a supply chain problem or a structural problem, I would say both are two sides of the same coin. Thank you.
Can you repeat that point and explain that a bit?
No, I think we asked whether it's a supply chain issue or a structural issue, and I think both are two sides of the same coin. So I think we need to tackle it together.
Yeah, I think there is definitely more to the structural issue beyond just the supply chain. But indeed, they are feeding into each other, no doubt about that. Just for our audience, I will also summarize in Hindi now, and at least I'll try to attempt. जो भी इस कन्वर्सेशन में, इस बातचीत में निकल कर आया साथियों, एक हमने आइडेंटिफाई किया कि प्रॉब्लम कहां पर है. ये आइडेंटिफाई किया गया कि जो ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन हुआ उसमें पहले हम शिप टू फूड प्रॉब्लम पे थे, क्योंकि हमें फूड सिक्योरिटी चाहिए थी, पर अब हम उससे शिप टू फर्टिलाइजर वाली प्रॉब्लम में चले गए हैं कि अब हर शिप के साथ हमारा फर्टिलाइजर हमारे पास पहुंच जाना चाहिए. उसका कारण था वो सीड्स जो ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन के समय में आए. वो इंटरेस्टिंगली एक तो बहुत फर्टिलाइजर चाहते थे, और जो फर्टिलाइजर उनको चाहिए था वो हमें इंपोर्ट करना नेसेसरी था. दूसरा एक पॉइंट जो डॉक्टर रघुराम ने बताया कि वो फर्टिलाइजर पर्टिकुलरली उनका फर्टिलाइजर रिस्पॉन्स रेशियो लो था, तो वो स्ट्रक्चरली हमें ऐसे सिस्टम में ले गए जहां पे हमें फर्टिलाइजर ज्यादा प्रयोग करना पड़ा यील्ड इंक्रीज के लिए. और शुरुआत में उसमें ज्यादा फोकस भी नहीं किया गया. यील्ड बढ़नी चाहिए चाहे कितना भी फर्टिलाइजर कंज्यूम हो रहा हो. और जो रिफॉर्म्स हुए वो सब्सिडी फोकस्ड रहे, जिससे एक इरिवर्सिबली हम एक प्रॉब्लम में फंस गए हैं. उसने ना ही फर्टिलाइजर डिपेंडेंस खत्म की, ना ही फर्टिलाइजर इंपोर्ट डिपेंडेंस खत्म की. उसने रादर डिस्टॉर्ट कर दिए इंसेंटिव्स को, और हम उसको और यूज करने लगे. इनपुट एफिशिएंसी और मुश्किल से नजर आने लगी सिस्टम में. और डॉक्टर दौंती ने जो मल्टीपल क्राइसिस बताए कि फ्यूल इन्फ्लेशन भी हो रहा है, कुकिंग ऑयल इन्फ्लेशन भी हो रहा है, फर्टिलाइजर शॉर्टेज तो है ही, और साथ साथ में एक पॉलिसी कंफ्यूजन, इनकोहेरेंट पॉलिसीज जो कोहेरेंट नहीं है, सही लोगों को टारगेट नहीं कर पा रही हैं, इंक्लूड नहीं कर पा रही हैं, ऐसी पॉलिसीज अभी भी हैं. और ये पूरी प्रॉब्लम को हमें सॉल्व करना पड़ेगा. ये तो प्रॉब्लम डायग्नोसिस हुआ. रिस्क भी है जो एक आइडेंटिफाई किया गया. दो, कि हम इंपोर्ट डिपेंडेंस जो है कि हम बाकी देशों पर निर्भर हैं फर्टिलाइजर को लेकर, ये एक प्रॉब्लम हमें सॉल्व करनी है. बट दूसरा, फर्टिलाइजर जो डिपेंडेंस है हमारे एग्रीकल्चर में, फार्म्स में, वो भी प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करनी है. दोनों अलग अलग प्रॉब्लम है, इनको ध्यान में रखें. और ऐसा कोई हम कदम ना उठाएं जो इरिवर्सिबल हो अभी शॉर्ट टर्म में. नाउ मेरी टीम मुझे नच कर रही है, मेरे को पढ़ना पड़ेगा। ओके, चलिए अब हम अगले सेशन पर चलते हैं। ये हमने डायग्नोसिस कर लिया है, अब हम रिस्पॉन्स की तरफ चलते हैं। समय हमने थोड़ा ज्यादा लिया है पहले सेशन में, तो अगले 2 सेशन में से थोड़ा समय निकालना होगा, तो लेट्स स्टार्ट विद 30 मिनट्स। पहला, मे बी वी कैन स्टार्ट वेरी क्विकली विद डॉक्टर रघुराम। मुझे ये भी जानकारी है डॉक्टर रघुराम को निकलना होगा 3 बजे तक, तो उन्हीं से शुरू करते हैं। द मोस्ट इमीडिएट responses to this crisis that we are seeing, Dr. Raghuram, are of technological kind. Neem coated urea use कर लें, nano urea and so on. Do these reduce dependence or actually increase them? What lock-ins might they create? Could you name one technology that we can scale and one that we should not scale and risks lock-in? मैं अपने हिंदी वाले साथियों के लिए एक बार दोबारा से रिपीट कर देता हूं कि हम जो बहुत सारे रिस्पॉन्सेज देख रहे हैं, जो भी आ रहे हैं, वो अक्सर टेक्नोलॉजी तरह के हैं कि कोई नई टेक्नोलॉजी ले आए, नीम कोटेड यूरिया, नैनो यूरिया एक्सेट्रा। तो क्या इनसे हम जो फर्टिलाइजर डिपेंडेंस, जो हमारी रियल प्रॉब्लम है, उसको कम कर पाएंगे या कहीं ये बढ़ा ना दे लॉन्ग टर्म में? और किस तरह की टेक्नोलॉजी है जो हमें स्केल करनी चाहिए और कौन सी टेक्नोलॉजी है जो एक्चुअली हमें स्केल नहीं करनी चाहिए? डॉक्टर रघुराम।
देखिए, एक बात तो मैं स्पष्ट कर दूं, साइंस की तरफ से इस फील्ड को मैं कम से कम 20 साल से बहुत क्लोजली वॉच कर रहा हूं, देश भर में और दुनिया भर में। कोई भी फर्टिलाइजर यूज एफिशिएंसी, चाहे नाइट्रोजन हो, फास्फोरस हो, पोटाश हो, कोई भी हो, इंप्रूव करने की कोई मैजिक टेक्नोलॉजी अभी तक नहीं आई है। और कोई ऐसा भी लगभग अब ये साफ हो गया है कि किसी एक टेक्नोलॉजी का, किसी एक मेजर से आपकी फर्टिलाइजर यूज एफिशिएंसी डबल हो जाए, ऐसा कोई मैजिक फॉर्मूला नहीं है। चाहे नैनो फर्टिलाइजर लीजिए, पहले 50% यूरिया रिडक्शन के नाम पर लेके आया गया था। अब जो 10 दिन पहले गेजेट नोटिफिकेशन आया है, उसमें सरकार ने खुद माना है कि वो 25% यूरिया रिडक्शन पॉसिबल है। यानी इंडस्ट्री ने अपने इनोवेशन को बढ़ाने की बजाय सरकार ने ही उनकी लिमिटेशन को एक्सेप्ट कर लिया है। एंड 25% इज ऑल्सो मोस्टली द अपर लिमिट ऑफ एनी इंप्रूवमेंट दैट एनी इंटरवेंशन कैन गिव यू, चाहे वो इनहिबिटर बेस्ड फर्टिलाइजर हो, यूरियाज इनहिबिटर, नाइट्रिफिकेशन इनहिबिटर, तरह तरह के इनहिबिटर्स जो कि इंडिया में नहीं है क्योंकि वो पेटेंटेड है और एक्सपेंसिव है। नैनो फर्टिलाइजर्स भी 20-25% से ऊपर नहीं ले जा सकती, वो भी अगर आप कंपनी की या सरकार की फिगर्स को बिलीव करें। सब जगह, सब क्रॉप में, सब सिचुएशन में उतनी भी मिलेगी ये कोई गारंटी नहीं। वो 0 to 25% के रेंज में कहीं भी कुछ भी हो सकता है। तो फर्टिलाइजर फॉर्मुलेशन, कोई भी फर्टिलाइजर फॉर्मुलेशन नहीं है जो 10-20% से ऊपर आपको इंप्रूव कर सके। कोई भी क्रॉप इंप्रूवमेंट अभी तक नहीं हुआ है जो सीधा एग्जिस्टिंग यूज एफिशिएंसी को डबल करे, वो भी 10-20% में है। और कोई भी और तरीका ऐसा नहीं है जिसमें चाहे बायोचार करे, बायो फर्टिलाइजर करे, कोई भी करे, लेकिन अगर आप इन सबको एक साथ लेके चलते हैं तो शायद एडेड बेनिफिट्स के मिलने के चांस है। सबसे पहली आपको इंडियन सिचुएशन में ये मानना पड़ेगा, आपका सीरियल्स और लेग्यूम्स का प्रोडक्शन जो है डाइवर्सिफाई होता जा रहा है। लेग्यूम्स जो नेचुरली हवा के नाइट्रोजन को फिक्स करके अपनी नाइट्रोजन की डिमांड कम करती हैं, उनका प्रोडक्शन हमने ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशन से ही लगभग स्टैग्नेट कर दिया या कम कर दिया। इसीलिए हम ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशन से पहले शायद लेग्यूम्स नहीं इंपोर्ट करते थे, सीरियल्स इंपोर्ट करते थे। अब हम सीरियल्स एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं, लेग्यूम्स इंपोर्ट करते हैं, ये एक प्रॉब्लम है। तो अगर आप मेरे से कहें तो हर क्रॉपिंग सिस्टम में एक लेग्यूम जरूर होना चाहिए, और वो सोयाबीन के अलावा कोई दूसरा लेग्यूम होना चाहिए, क्योंकि सोयाबीन के लिए फर्टिलाइजर की डिमांड तो कम है, लेकिन सोयाबीन अगले क्रॉप के लिए कोई नाइट्रोजन सॉइल में नहीं छोड़ता है। ये रिसेंटली मैंने अकोला में फार्मर से सीखा है। बाकी बहुत सारे दालें हैं, बीन्स हैं और तरह के लेग्यूम्स हैं जो जिनकी खुद की फर्टिलाइजर रिक्वायरमेंट लगभग सीरियल से 10% के अंदर हो जाता है, लेकिन वो अगले क्रॉप के लिए भी थोड़ा जमीन में छोड़ता है। तो अगर आपको फर्टिलाइजर डिमांड कम करना है, सबसे बड़ी जो दिक्कत रही हमारे पॉलिसीज में, हम सप्लाई साइड मैनेजमेंट पे बहुत ज्यादा फोकस्ड हैं, ऑब्सेसिवली फोकस्ड हैं, और डिमांड साइड मैनेजमेंट के तरफ ध्यान नहीं दे रहे। आपका पॉलिसी अटेंशन ये नहीं होना चाहिए कि जितनी फर्टिलाइजर की बिजनेस एज यूजुअल सिनेरियो में डिमांड है उतनी कैसे सप्लाई करें। आपको ये सोचना चाहिए फर्टिलाइजर डिमांड कैसे कम करें। फर्टिलाइजर डिमांड करने के तरीके हैं और दुनिया भर में यूज भी हो रहे हैं डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज में। सबसे पहले आप लेग्यूम्स ले आइए हर क्रॉपिंग सिस्टम में, उससे 30-40% डिमांड वैसे कम हो जाएगा। किसी भी इंडिविजुअल टेक्नोलॉजी से ज्यादा, मैंने कहा कोई भी टेक्नोलॉजी 10-20% ज्यादा नहीं देता, लेग्यूम अकेला 40% दे सकता है हर क्रॉपिंग सिस्टम में, अगर आप ले आए, रोटेशन ले आए या मिक्सड क्रॉपिंग ले आए। पहली बात। दूसरी बात, 1 किलो मेन्योर या 1 लीटर यूरिन वेस्ट नहीं होना चाहिए, पूरा का पूरा रिसाइकिल होना चाहिए। सारे टेक्नोलॉजीज अवेलेबल है, लेकिन इंडिया में एक ब्यूटीफुल सब्सिडाइज्ड फर्टिलाइजर पाउडर है तो कोई भूसा में हाथ नहीं डालता, उसके लिए कोई सब्सिडी भी नहीं है, उसके लिए सप्लाई चेन नहीं है, उसके लिए कोई सिस्टम नहीं है। ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशन एंड व्हाइट रिवोल्यूशन है मूव इन ऑपोजिट डायरेक्शंस। अब क्रॉप फार्मर मेन्योर को भी खरीदना पड़ता है और लाइव स्टॉक फार्मर घास भी खरीदना पड़ता है। This was never the case.
15
So
seconds
this
to
is
wrap
the
up, please.
issue I'm telling about. So don't get too much focused on fertilizer technologies. There is no technology which will give you more than 20% improvement anywhere in the world, and most of them are so expensive they are not even meaningful in the Indian context. Think of demand reduction, and that is possible.
Perfect. I was just thinking to summarize in English because most of your intervention was in Hindi, but
Hindi,
you
okay.
did my job. Thank you for that. Indeed, the message is clear. Let's move to, and I believe you would be leaving in another 6 minutes. So thank you again for joining us and sharing your insights, Dr. Raghuram. In case you are able to come back later, please do come back. We'll be there for another hour for sure.
Yeah, I'll sit for a little longer and then go.
Perfect. If I could go to Dr. Donti. Dr. Donti, you have called for very interestingly and I think very relevant a PMO level war room. And I also already hear that there is sort of a group of ministers, etc., being set up it is in the news. If you were in this sort of PMO level war room today and you are collectively working, what do you think this war room should do in terms of its initial actions? The first set of actions, what should that be? What would you secure, communicate, ration or import first, and why? And what trade-offs would you accept, particularly in the early response? Dr. Donti.
Basically,
एक मिनट, मैंने एक गलती की डॉक्टर दोंती. I need to translate for our Hindi speaking colleagues. तो मैं let me quickly do that. डॉक्टर दोंती से साथियों मैंने प्रश्न किया है. उन्होंने अभी एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट आइडिया दिया कि पीएमओ प्राइम मिनिस्टर के लेवल पर एक वॉर रूम डेवलप होना चाहिए जहां पर इस पर एक कलेक्टिव मिशन मोड में एक्शन होना चाहिए. तो मैंने प्रश्न पूछा है कि इस वॉर रूम, इस ग्रुप का इनिशियल एक्शन, जो पहले उनके इंटरवेंशन है, वो क्या होने चाहिए, उनको क्या सिक्योर करना चाहिए, क्या उनको कम्युनिकेट और बताना चाहिए, किन चीजों को राशन करके रोक के रखना चाहिए, किन चीजों को इंपोर्ट करना चाहिए, और ये करते हुए क्या ट्रेड ऑफ्स होंगे इनिशियल फेज में, शुरुआती दौर में. डॉक्टर दोंती.
first, I think I suggested war room because basically at the topmost level, when we are looking at the gadget notification, they mentioned a cell within a petroleum ministry which will keep monitoring what's happening. I said This has to be at a higher level, at the minister's level. Basic thing is first we need to increase information availability. So today, government on April 6th, government is not clear or it's not transparent in admitting to what extent we are going to be hit by this fertilizer shortage and the interlinking crisis. So, second, I was suggesting is, now we have a lot of data, we have information resources. Why can't we do more dashboard kind of information, regular information sharing? Otherwise, in India, shortages, even if there is a smell of a shortage, there is a lot of hoarding happens and poor people or unemployed people, they will not be able to get the resources which are required for food production. So farmers are going to lose out and we made them dependent on fertilizers. Today, paddy production almost 95% across India, it begins with fertilizer bag. Without fertilizer bag, there is no paddy production. So the seriousness of the problem is not yet understood by the government of India. Second, this war room should be coordinating with the states. Even today, last I think 1 week back, government of India organized a meeting with opposition leaders because Parliament was in session. But even today, it has not coordinated with state governments. In fact, in March, generally, there are Kharif Action Plan meetings within the Agriculture Ministry. But even there or outside that or within state government and central government, there is no consultation at all on what can be done, how should we go about it. The third, as I mentioned, the linkages because the fertilizer shortage is linked with again food production and food production is linked with the imports which are increasing and ultimately the livelihood of farmers which is going to be impacted by both the policies. So there I think again government should shift this 1,73,000 crores, which it is trying to again invest in chemical fertilizers, it can shift easily at least 10,000 crores right now in the next 2 months. It can prepare, alternative compost right from urban waste. It can encourage green manure crops. It can encourage nitrogen fixing
Yeah.
crops by
Dr. Donti, we have 1
declaring
minute. So
MSP.
if I could nudge you, I think these are indeed you're framing these, but do you also see some trade-offs? For example, when we become transparent, there is also chances of, say, panic and hoarding in the system. So there is a clear trade-off of what to communicate, what not to communicate. And similarly, now if we shift this big sum towards composting, the trade-off is the risk of the system to absorb that fund. So is the system ready to do that much of composting and bio-input production, etc., and absorb that sort of capital flow? So do you see trade-offs here? Maybe 30 seconds quickly.
Yeah, the word you are using trade-off, but I am saying right now we have an opportunity to shift, government resources to from chemical fertilizers to natural, encouraging natural compost in the next 2 months. April, May, we have a lot of time, 60 days, to increase this shortfall of 30% of the chemical fertilizers. And that's possible when we have a mission mode of a national natural compost mission. And we have several options, which the only thing is we need a government, एक संकल्प होना चाहिए ताकि ये हम कर सके और किसान को ये जो समस्या आने वाला है उससे छुटकारा मिले. I think that's what I have been suggesting.
Thank you. And also attempting to summarize in Hindi. Government ko sankalp, this political will, I think we'll come to Dr. Sudha Narayanan with that. But before we go there, if I could quickly maybe just to summarize a bit of what you shared, Dr. Donti, in Hindi, what I've gathered, and जो हिंदी भाषी साथी हैं उनके लिए, एक डॉक्टर दोंती ने जो 2-3 इंपॉर्टेंट बातें बताई हैं। एक, कि हाईएस्ट लेवल पे बनना चाहिए ताकि इन्फ्लुएंस और एक्शन एक्सपीरियंस स्केल हो पाए। कोऑर्डिनेशन स्टेट्स के साथ बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, सभी स्टेट्स के साथ, राज्यों के साथ बातचीत में काम होना चाहिए और ट्रांसपेरेंटली होना चाहिए। जो सिचुएशन है वो बताई जाए, उस पर अभी हमने विचार रखा कि कितना बताया जाए, कितना नहीं बताया जाए। ये थोड़ा सोचने का विषय हो सकता है, क्योंकि पैनिक भी हो सकता है। पर एक जो इंपॉर्टेंट विषय डॉक्टर दोंती ने बताया कि ये ऐसी सिचुएशन है जहां पे बोल्ड मूव्स किए जा सकते हैं और करने चाहिए, जहां तक सिस्टम में काबिलियत है वो करने की। अभी ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग, नेचुरल फार्मिंग का बेस बढ़ रहा है, एक नेशनल कंपोस्ट मिशन जिसका डॉक्टर दोंती ने को ध्यान में दिलाया, उसमें कैपेसिटी है। तो क्या वो फर्टिलाइजर की तरफ जो खर्चा हम करने का सोच रहे हैं, उसका एक सिग्निफिकेंट पोर्शन इस तरफ लाया जा सकता है, जिस हद तक हमारा देश इसको क्रियान्वित करने के लिए तैयार है। तो ये विषय डॉक्टर दोंती लाए। मैं एक बार नचिकेत आपके पास आना चाहूंगा, बिकॉज नाउ वी आर ट्राइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड कि कौन से शॉर्ट टर्म में इंटरवेंशंस ठीक हैं, ये कौन से अवॉइड करने चाहिए, कौन से गलत रहेंगे। तो उस संदर्भ में कोई तरीका है गुड और बैड और अवॉइडेबल टू बी अवॉइडेड इंटरवेंशन या कॉस्मेटिक इंटरवेंशंस का, जो सिर्फ प्रॉब्लम को सस्टेन करते हैं और प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व नहीं करते, एंड विच वन ऑफ दीज short term measures enable transition towards agricultural systems, and if any concrete examples you can share.
Yeah, so मेरे हिसाब से a good intervention is one that will help farmers move beyond this green revolution paradigm. तो अभी काफी सुझाव तो ऑलरेडी अलग अलग पैनलिस्ट दे चुके हैं। सो इफ वी अब किसान पैडी और ये गेहूं और धान ही क्यों लगाते हैं? क्योंकि उसमें प्रोक्योरमेंट है। तो अभी अगर हम, जो डॉक्टर रघुराम भी कह रहे थे कि हमें और लेग्यूम्स पल्सेस उगाना चाहिए, तो अगर पल्सेस में हम प्रोक्योरमेंट करने लगे, उसका भी अगर ढंग से एमएसपी हो और उस एमएसपी में प्रोक्योरमेंट करने लगे, तो ऑटोमेटिकली फार्मर्स विल स्टार्ट ग्रोइंग मोर पल्सेस एंड दैट विल हेल्प इम्प्रूव सॉइल हेल्थ। सो आई थिंक फंडामेंटली जो एक टेस्ट है कि इज द intervention, policy intervention, or any other intervention being made, if it is being done only to promote the product, then I would say it is cosmetic. If it is being done to promote soil health, then I would say it is more holistic and more long term. So one example, like I said, is pulses. Even millets require lesser fertilizer than पैडी एंड व्हीट, तो वो भी अच्छा रहेगा करना। अदर एग्जांपल्स मेनी अदर्स आल्सो स्पोक अबाउट इज इंक्रीजिंग सॉइल कार्बन, क्योंकि अगर आप बीज लेके एक खाद के बोरी में बीज डालिए तो नहीं उगेगा। So there is essential nutrients in the soil, there are essential microbes in the soil that are required to make the fertilizer available, and that is all under this banner that we call soil carbon content or organic carbon content. तो इसको भी बढ़ाने की बहुत ज़रूरत है, otherwise it is, like suppose I start smoking and then today with one cigarette I'm happy, but tomorrow I'll require 2 cigarettes, day after I'll require 3 cigarettes and so on. तो fertilizer के साथ भी यही हो रहा है, and any cosmetic change is just like then taking a nicotine patch. So your fundamental dependence on nicotine is not being addressed. तो I think the test should be कि अगर किसी भी कुछ भी हम कर रहे हैं इस समस्या में, तो क्या उस समस्या से हम सॉइल हेल्थ इंप्रूव करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं या सिर्फ और रासायनिक खाद को प्राप्त कराने के लिए हम कोई इंटरवेंशन कर रहे हैं? सो फॉर मी दैट वुड बी द टेस्ट। एंड द सेकेंड, इफ आई माइट ऐड, वुड बी, आई थिंक a lot of focus on the government also has been कि हम fertilizer subsidy कम कैसे करें. So it is they are looking at it from a financial point of view, and that's why no soil health cards, a lot of digitization. Now there are point of sale machines, and eventually, ideally, How much that is feasible practically is a separate matter I won't get into. But ideally, they would like to track how much fertilizer each farmer is buying and start limiting it like we have done it for cylinders. No, each family is eligible only for certain number of cylinders. Beyond that, you will not get subsidy. But I think those would be the cosmetic solutions, those would be the false solutions. And the other big thing, I don't know if you would call it short term, but the other major thing is this fertilizer subsidy, which is skewed heavily in favor of chemical fertilizers. It should definitely be neutral so that even a farmer who is using only organic inputs, natural inputs, and not actually placing a increasing import dependence of the country on fertilizer, those farmers should also get financial support from the government. Right now, जो जितना ज्यादा imported fertilizer use करता है उनको उतना ज्यादा सरकार financial support दे रही है. So this definitely I think is very skewed policy, and the policy should be neutral, and there should be uh, equal support whether a farmer is using chemical inputs or other alternative organic natural inputs. They should be equally supported by the government, and the focus should certainly not be to reduce the financial support to the sector, but it should be repurposed. So what I'm saying is that my fear is that policy will come that over time will slowly reduce fertilizer subsidy, but not, and therefore end up reducing financial support to the
जी
sector. Whereas वो नहीं करना चाहिए. बस वो जो सपोर्ट आ रहा है उसको रिपर्पस करके किस तरीके से किस चीज के लिए कौन से बिहेवियर के लिए दे रहे हैं वो रिपर्पस करना चाहिए. सो आई स्टॉप हियर.
Understood. And thank you for framing it like that. Let me just do that for our English audience today. What you have said is that let's not focus, let's not push just inputs or technology or a product. Let's focus on more towards outcome, which is soil health. So any policy, any initiative that really focuses on outcome, particularly soil health, that is the one that needs to be picked up. You have highlighted that we need to really focus on the demand, again, demand side of the fertilizer, particularly via the cropping pattern, and then moving to more legumes, etc. The point that Dr. Raghuram and others were also making is another important one. Third, neutral subsidy structure is something that can be picked up even in the early phases, potentially, because it also goes with what Dr. Donti was saying. No, we need to move that money towards more NF concept compost mission, and he says that this is possible potentially in the next 3 months. So it sort of gels well with there. So those are some of the key ideas that you have framed. Thank you, Nachiket, for doing that. Let me go to Dr. Sudha Narayanan, and let's discuss the issue of political will that was highlighted. We have seen repeated cycles, Dr. Narayanan, of crisis, then small reforms and structure remaining unchanged, the way Bhamini framed in the beginning in the slide. What's missing leverage point really, in your opinion? What is politically or institutionally blocking real change? The more concrete you can be, more specific, the more helpful for us and the audience. Dr. Narayanan.
Let me focus quite narrowly on the fertilizer subsidy. I think if, everyone else, I agree with everyone on the various aspects of repurposing subsidies, a war room, all of that as short-term measures. But I just want to shed some light on the big roadblock. And that's really coming from the fact that, as Nachiket pointed out, that we are thinking of this as a fertilizer subsidy problem. And not as a soils problem, right? I mean, we're still thinking of fertilizers, but not as thinking about soils in the larger sense. Now, that then drives us into tackling the fiscal aspects of the fertilizer subsidy. And that, I think, as much as we would like to say that in the short term, you can actually take a little bit of it and fund the beginnings of a transition, there are some roadblocks. And especially what's happened, if you look at the history, in 1997, as early as 1997, the Hanumantarao Committee report said your fertilizer subsidies are, as originally intended, supporting urea manufacturers to ensure fertilizer self-sufficiency. But the fact that it was designed in a way that we were actually supporting inefficient manufacturing of urea. And with it came a host of suggestions saying that you should disconnect it. So at that time, the price of urea was fixed for the farmer, but the difference between what it costs for manufacturers to produce and what they were selling to the farmer was given to the urea industry. And actually, urea manufacturers were guaranteed a cost plus formula. So the cost of production plus 12% assured post-tax returns was assured. So there was absolutely no incentive for manufacturers to be efficient. And some of my early work with Professor Ashok Gulati suggested that 1/3 of the subsidy was actually going to the manufacturers over a decade rather than to the farmers. So the conversation started in 1997, and the first serious sort of attempt at reform started in 2003. But if you look at 2003, the Geeta Krishnan report actually laid out the stages in which we would have to slowly move away from this architectural scaffolding of support we had, and therefore completely move away to a transition and a structural change. That hasn't happened. We did 2 of the 3 stages half-heartedly and then didn't do the rest, and then we got stuck there. And that's been, so we need to ask why. I think one is the fear that if you did anything to fertilizer, you're going to have a food security problem. The second is that now there are deeply entrenched interests, including the fertilizer industry lobby, which would actually advocate for the status quo. And I think these two make it politically hard for a government without the political capital to make a change. But I think we are in a different place now. First, a crisis, as the title of this session indicates, can be converted to an opportunity. And there I just want to highlight as short term, we have a fiscal problem, but I don't think we are there with an agronomic problem. I'm not an agricultural scientist, but we have 10 times more food stock, cereal stocks than the norm suggests. So we are at least safe for a year that can buffer our cereal
Just a
needs.
nudge. Let's close in a minute, madam.
Yeah, so we are in a good position in that sense. And I really like the idea of Professor Dondi's suggestion that we have a war room. And I would not have called it a war room, but a committee that cross-cuts ministries, federal levels, is exactly what you need to signal to farmers, consumers, everyone of the urgency of the situation. And lastly, I think that such a committee is essential because there is a danger that our incremental reform may just be crisis management that actually leads us in the opposite direction of what we need for long term. So now we need to be very clear that these incremental reforms in the short term is actually setting the stage for the deeper, longer term structural transformation, moving from thinking about fertilizers to soils and for repurposing subsidies. So I think we should see incremental reform as the first step to the deeper reforms we want to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Narayanan. And let me just quickly summarize for हमारे हिंदी भाषी साथियों के लिए जो एसेंशियल बात डॉक्टर नारायणन ने बोली कि सॉल्यूशंस और पॉलिसी डायरेक्शन पहले भी आई है वो पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी इतनी इंट्रेंच्ड है कि वो सॉल्यूशंस पिकअप नहीं हो रहे हैं और वहां पे पॉलिटिकल कैपिटल का होना बहुत जरूरी है. तो क्या ये जो क्राइसिस है जिसमें हम हैं ये नए रास्ते खोल सकती है? पॉलिटिकल कैपिटल भी बन सकता है क्या और अपॉर्चुनिटी स्पेसेस बन सकते हैं क्या? कोई ऐसी क्रॉस कटिंग मल्टी मिनिस्ट्रियल कमेटी जो ऐसे इंक्रीमेंटल रिफॉर्म्स ला सके जो हमें सॉल्यूशन की डायरेक्शन में ले जाएं, जिस तरह से फॉर एग्जांपल जो जीएसटी रिफॉर्म हुआ, आई थिंक इट इज समथिंग वेयर मल्टीपल इंटरेस्ट वर एट प्ले एंड गवर्नमेंट फाउंड अ वे. क्या उस तरह की जरूरत है? सॉरी, ये जीएसटी वाला पॉइंट मैंने अपना ऐड किया, so I don't want to attribute it there. But yeah, उस तरह हमें आगे बढ़ना होगा. और क्या इंक्रीमेंटल रिफॉर्म्स उस लॉन्ग टर्म सॉल्यूशन की तरफ ले जा सकते हैं इस क्राइसिस सिचुएशन में? मैं देख रहा हूं कि पार्टिसिपेंट्स ने, डॉक्टर बीथल का मैं हाथ देख रहा हूं. डॉक्टर बीथल एंड अदर्स, वील कम बैक टू द कन्वर्सेशन, अलाउ सम टाइम. Okay, let's move ahead. This is the, sorry, What's the nudge, folks? In English? No, we didn't. So he did. Okay. Let's go back to the conversation. We are entering the third round, and we are going to discuss about the transformation. So, see, what have we done? We have identified, we have diagnosed the problem, looked at the issues. Now we are moving. We just discussed what we should do in the short term to manage the fire that we are with. And now we need to look at, let's just take a step back and see what kind of pathways can take us in the right direction. If a long-term transformation has to happen, what kind of incremental reforms, as Dr. Narayanan was also suggesting, should be sequenced first? What kind of interventions should be sequenced first as we build this long-term transition? Towards that conversation, allow me to start with Dr. Raghuram, if you are still here. Would it be okay if I get you in, Dr. Raghuram?
Yeah. I will leave in a few minutes.
Perfect. Then we are
So
at
let me
the
make
sweet
my
spot.
remarks and leave it
Yes,
for
yes,
the house
please.
to debate on it.
Yes,
I
Dr.
think,
Raghuram, yes, please. I will briefly frame a question, and please do come in. As we discussed, your work suggests that the policy often misdiagnoses fertilizer dependence. In your opinion, how should we rethink the role of synthetic fertilizer in the long term? What structural reforms must come first and allow for transformation towards agroecology going ahead? For you, please come in.
थैंक यू. जिस तरह से शुरू में ये सवाल फ्रेम किया गया था, उसी में जवाब भी है. अगर हम ट्वीकिंग करें, बिजनेस एज यूजुअल को ऑल्टर ना करें और हमेशा सप्लाई साइड पॉलिसी फोकस रखें, तो ये क्राइसिस हमेशा गोल गोल घूमता रहेगा, वापस अलग अलग रूप से आता रहेगा. तो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशनल इनिशिएटिव के अलावा इस क्राइसिस को, इस साइकिल को ब्रेक करने का कोई दूसरा तरीका नहीं है. अगर ब्रेक करना है तो आपको सप्लाई साइड से पहले डिमांड साइड में आना पड़ेगा. तो पॉलिसी का सबसे पहला क्वेश्चन ये होना चाहिए, हम फर्टिलाइजर डिपेंडेंस को कैसे कम करें. इंपोर्ट डिपेंडेंस नहीं, ओवरऑल फर्टिलाइजर डिपेंडेंस को कैसे कम करें. अगर फर्टिलाइजर को आप मान लीजिए 20-30% भी कम करते हैं, तो इंपोर्ट डिपेंडेंस भी कम हो जाएगी, सब्सिडी भी कम हो जाएगी. अगर टोटल फर्टिलाइजर कम हो जाएगी तो सब कुछ कम हो जाएगा. ये पॉसिबल है. इसके लिए आपको कुछ बेसिक चीजों का ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा. पहले फर्टिलाइजर को एज द फर्स्ट ऑप्शन ऑफ क्रॉप न्यूट्रिशन नहीं रखना है. फर्टिलाइजर शुड ओनली बी द लास्ट ऑप्शन एज ए टॉप अप. आजकल के मोबाइल लैंग्वेज में आपका बैलेंस कम हो गया, आपने टॉप अप किया. तो इसी तरह से आपने सब कुछ डाला, मेन्योर भी डाला, लेग्यूम भी किया, कंपोस्ट भी किया, बायोचार भी किया, फिर भी अगर कुछ क्रॉप न्यूट्रिशन का डिमांड रहता है तो जरूर फर्टिलाइजर डालें. मैं नेचुरल फार्मिंग और केमिकल फार्मिंग के बाइनरी के रूप में नहीं देखता हूं. मेरे समझ में ये एक कंटिन्यूम है, एक एक्सट्रीम से दूसरे एक्सट्रीम की तरफ. इसके मिक्स एंड मैच के बहुत सारे पॉसिबिलिटीज हैं, और कौन सा कॉम्बिनेशन किस जगह कैसे काम करता है वो फार्मर सक्षम है डिसाइड करने के लिए. लेकिन ऑप्शन उस तक पहुंचना चाहिए और स्क्यूड प्रोडक्शन सिस्टम नहीं होना चाहिए. तो सबसे पहली बात, बेसल डोज ना रखें, फर्टिलाइजर को टॉप अप में रखें. तो बेसल डोज क्या हो, उसके लिए सबसे पहला, अगर साल भर में 2-3 क्रॉप्स आप उगा रहे हैं, उनमें से एक लेग्यूम जरूर है, आइडियली सोयाबीन के अलावा कोई और लेग्यूम है, तो आपका यूरिया डिमांड उस सीजन के लिए 70-80% सेव हो गया उस सीजन के लिए. अगले सीजन के लिए भी थोड़ा कम हुआ. तो पहला इंटरवेंशन लेग्यूम. दूसरा इंटरवेंशन मेन्योर और यूरिन का रिसाइकलिंग का ऑलरेडी टेस्टेड प्रूवन टेक्नोलॉजी इंडिया में है. एनडीडीबी हंड्रेड्स ऑफ प्लांट्स देश भर में लगा चुका है, और वो यूरिन और मेन्योर दोनों निकाल करके पहले बायोगैस निकालते हैं, जो आपको एलपीजी के रिप्लेसमेंट में काम आता है. और जो बचा कुचा केक रहता है, बायोचार, वो सबसे बेस्ट फर्टिलाइजर है. सॉइल कार्बन भी इंप्रूव करता है और नाइट्रोजन, पोटैश, फॉस्फोरस सब कुछ कम करता है. तो लेग्यूम के अलावा आपने अगर मेन्योर और यूरिन का रिसाइकलिंग पूरा किया, एग्जिस्टिंग टेक्नोलॉजीज को स्केल अप किया, बायोगैस की अवेलेबिलिटी को स्केल अप किया, एनडीडीबी और उसके पार्टनर्स को पूरा इन्वॉल्व किया एक मिशन मोड में, तो मेरे ख्याल से ये पॉसिबल है। कुछ आज ही पेपर में आया था, यूपी में कुछ ऐसे डिस्ट्रिक्ट है जहां पे एलपीजी क्राइसिस है ही नहीं, उन्होंने पूरा बायोचार से अपना काम चला लिया, बायोगैस से। ये एग्जांपल्स है, तो ये देखना है। और ऊपर से अगर फिर भी थोड़ा कम है, सॉलिड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट है, कंपोस्ट मैनेजमेंट है, और सुवेज वाटर से भी फर्टिलाइजर बनाने की टेक्नोलॉजी आज अवेलेबल है। हिंदुस्तान में तो नहीं, लेकिन अवेलेबल है, वो मीडियम टर्म में आपका काम आएगा। इन सारे चीजों को हैंडल करने के बाद जो न्यूट्रिएंट्स आपको ऑलरेडी पोल्यूटेंट बन रहे हैं, पहले उनसे आप मुक्ति पाओ, उनको फार्मिंग सिस्टम में ले आओ। उसके बाद फर्टिलाइजर की कमी है तो डालो, बेशक 5, 10, 20% अगर आपने फर्टिलाइजर डाला, कोई नुकसान नहीं होने वाला। लेकिन सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है, ये सबको समझना जरूरी है साइंस के समझदारी से, ओवर फर्टिलाइजेशन इज द लार्जेस्ट मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट कॉज ऑफ डिकार्बोनाइजेशन। सॉइल कार्बन का कम होने का सबसे बड़ा कारण उर्वरकों का ज्यादा इस्तेमाल करना है। उनको कम किए बिना आप जितना भी सॉइल कार्बन डालेंगे वो फिर से कम हो जाएगा। ये बायोलॉजिकल फिनोमिनन है।
थैंक यू डॉक्टर।
इसीलिए मैं कह रहा हूँ कि टॉपअप में अगर रखेंगे, कम मात्रा में रखेंगे, जरूरत के हिसाब से रखेंगे, तो फर्टिलाइजर भी सेव होगा, सब्सिडी भी सेव होगा, इंपोर्ट भी सेव होगा, और दूसरे जगह जो आपके न्यूट्रिएंट पोल्यूशन हो रहे हैं उससे भी आप देश को बचाएंगे।
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you again for staying for this long. I will quickly summarize what you said in English for our English-speaking audience, and thank you for doing that in Hindi. What I've gathered from Dr. Raghuram is that in this transition that we must be on in long term, some of the first important parts of the transition plan should be the following. First, definitely start looking at demand side, not just supply side, which starts with right cropping patterns. Definitely start pushing for legumes beyond soybean, and which can bring the fertilizer subsidy use by 70% in that season at least, and more and some for the rest. Start looking at fertilizer as a top-up solution, not a basal solution. And the situation is unfortunate. It is actually we are over fertilizing and creating havoc for the soils at the moment. Second big investment area, therefore, is to start investing in bio input systems. The example of NDDB led investments was shared, where biogas is being produced, which also solves for, by the way, the methane security, the natural gas security that the country is struggling with thanks to the impasse at the strait. Which these plants can produce bioslurry and potentially biochar, and they can then become the basis of improving the soil organic matter and therefore reduce the basal need of the fertilizer itself. Thank you, Dr. Raghuram, for your inputs. Now with that, I will move to Dr. Donti. If I could take your inputs on particularly the organic and natural farming that you have been trying to study and you have immense experience in. How do you think the approaches like these, as we scale, can we be in a situation where we are creating new dependencies as we scale them up? What is a better way to scale them up? And in that sequence of approach, what comes first? Dr. Donti.
Yeah, I'll come to that new dependency which you are talking. But basically, I think whatever we have been discussing, this is not a new idea of shifting subsidies from chemical fertilizers to natural farming. I think in the last 20 years, that has been mentioned several times. And in fact, as Dr. Sudha mentioned, government also wanted to reduce its exposure to chemical fertilizer subsidy. But the point today is that we are now at a crisis where the supply shock is so severe that it is going to be 30, 40, 50%, which is now almost similar to what Sri Lanka faced a few years back. And yet we are now talking of nano fertilizers as a new dependency or a new solution. And that's what I'm saying. It is suicidal policy which is being done. The second is the implications are also not being understood. Shifting I mean, the supply shock itself is going to impact on the food grain production, and that is how we had to now depend on imported cooking oil and now imported pulses. Now our
On
agriculture
that point, I would
imports.
say, Dr. Dunti, I think there is consensus in the room, right, that we should not just push for these sort of technologies and products and really focus on outcomes. But if I could really take your attention to organic farming and natural farming, which is framed as an important alternative and is being pushed now that we are in a crisis, I think it's a useful solution, at least one of the good options. But are there again risks of similar kind we can create in future and create lock-ins?
We have as they say, the low hanging fruit is the urban waste which we are looking at. Across India, we have a lot of wet urban waste. Once you segregate it, in the next 60 days, we have a lot of compost which can help in addressing this huge supply shock. And then the second issue is, now if we can promote green manure crops or even nitrogen fixing crops, and then declare MSP for, like Nachket mentioned, millets, or, there are many crops which don't require as much of chemical fertilizer as paddy. So the only thing government is to do is declare market incentives. It can say we'll give you MSP and we'll procure 10%, 20% of these crops. Farmers will shift and they'll find their own resources to grow such crops. It has happened earlier in small experiments here and there. But this is where I'm saying, even after 25 years of discussion, government is even today, when the supply shock is there, is not ready to go down this path, but it is still talking of shifting to nano fertilizers, and that's what the problem is.
Right. I think that again is some a question for Dr. Sudha Narayanan, like why after these many solutions, reports that you refer to, conversations, why are we not able to move ahead? We'll come to you, Dr. Narayanan, but before that, let me just expand the basket of solutions for which you need to solve for political will again and institutional solutions. I want to come to you, Nachiket. Imagine that fully agroecological or fully natural farming or fully organic farming, whatever non fertilizer dependent India that we can envision. What would a genuinely agroecological India require reaching there, like that transition to there would require in terms of R&D, subsidies, procurement, advisory systems to actively regenerate soils and empower farmers? Because this will really frame the total set of solutioning and or interventions that we need. And let's then go to Dr. Narayanan to see, can we do it differently this time? Nachiket.
या तो आप जो पूछ रहे हैं वो तो बहुत 2-3 मिनट में बताना आसान नहीं है.
Yes, so maybe the ones that can be taken up in the first quick phase, right? Later तो ठीक है, second phase में होता रहेगा.
नहीं, मैं थोड़ा उल्टा करना चाहूंगा. आई वुड रादर फोकस ऑन लॉन्ग टर्म देन क्विक फेज, क्योंकि शॉर्ट टर्म पे बहुत ज्यादा फोकस होता है. तो मैंने चैट में एक लिंक डाला है, सबको बस कह रहा हूँ कि एन अटेम्प्ट वाज मेड कि सपोज वी वांट टू एनविजन ऑल्टरनेटिव एग्रीकल्चरल पॉलिसी दैट प्रमोट्स एग्रो इकोलॉजी. वो कैसे होगा? तो उसके लिए हमने एक अटेम्प्ट किया था कि like you began, Apur, I think maybe it was even before the webinar began when we were just here, key food system, I mean, we can't just be looking at fertilizers, we have to look at the entire food system. तो उसके लिए फिर we have to look at lots of factors apart from fertilizer and just crop nutrition. तो इवन ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन का आप देखेंगे, हरित क्रांति में भी बीज से शुरू किया। तो हम किस तरीके के बीज प्रमोट कर रहे हैं, डॉक्टर रघुराम भी कह रहे थे कि जो बीज अभी प्रमोट कर रहे हैं उसमें वो जीन्स में वो एलील्स हैं जिसमें ये फर्टिलाइजर डिपेंडेंस है और यूज एफिशिएंसी घटता जा रहा है। तो बीज बदलने होंगे, हमें क्रॉप्स बदलने होंगे। क्रॉप्स बदलने के लिए जैसे नरसिम रेड्डी गारू भी कह रहे थे, हमें मार्केट से जो सरकार के तरफ से जो इंटरवेंशंस होंगे मार्केट में, स्पेसिफिकली एमएसपी एंड प्रोक्योरमेंट, मिलेट्स के लिए, पल्सेस दाल के लिए, ऑयल सीड्स के लिए, इनके लिए भी हमें करना होगा। एंड repurposing fertilizer subsidy, and I would again like to reiterate, without reducing the support to the sector, क्योंकि ओवरऑल इंटरनेशनली आप कंपेयर करेंगे अभी भी, डिस्पाइट ऑल दीज massive figures we have all been talking about, 1.73 lakh crore, 2 lakh crore and all, इसके बावजूद इंटरनेशनली there is a case to be made that the Indian farmer actually has a negative subsidy because the prices are depressed. तो इतने सब्सिडी के बावजूद किसान उपज उगाने में अपने जेब से पैसे डाल रहे हैं। So therefore my argument is not that we need to reduce financial support to the sector, but we certainly need to repurpose the subsidy and make it a more level playing field for even farmers who are not using chemical fertilizers or using synthetic fertilizers less. क्योंकि अभी suppose हम
Nachiket, so three clear dimensions you have framed: seeds, cropping pattern, and therefore the procurement policy and fertilizer subsidy reforms without reducing the support of to the farmers. But if I ask, what do, in your opinion, if I could push you a bit, agenda demand us today? Like, where do we start, and what all do we start with?
Yeah, I mean, to begin now, I would say focus on increasing soil organic carbon content. उसके लिए बहुत ऑलरेडी बात हो चुकी है कि एग्रीकल्चरल वेस्ट, एनिमल वेस्ट, अर्बन वेस्ट, इन सब चीज़ों को इसमें लाना शुरू करें। प्रिवेंट ब्लैक मार्केटिंग, दिस नरसिम रेड्डी गारू also mentioned this, and increasing use efficiency as much as possible through various technologies. But I would argue that these are all very short term, and we really, I think we talk too much about short term. We should also talk equally, if not more, about long term.
Yeah, and let's talk about what can we do in short term to enable the political will for incremental reforms and then transformational reforms later. So I will come to you, Dr. Sudha. Which forms of evidence actually shifts political action, political will? What evidence in past has been ignored? You just talked about the reports, but I'm sure there is evidence on natural farming, on organic farming, etc., that has been presented. Is there further any? What kind of evidence gets ignored generally, and why these past translations, past recommendations have not really led to change the point that Dr. Donti was talking about, and what Nachiket was framing, right? These, we need transformation in seeds, cropping pattern, fertilizer subsidy. I think this has been well articulated in the system. So where do we really start starting building for that political acceptance in short term?
I think as a researcher, I feel that providing coherent evidence is a necessary but not sufficient condition. And I think so, therefore, it's not as if we have the evidence, then that's going to bring political will, because they are two separate issues. That said, I think when you take decisions or stick to bad decisions because we are afraid of the consequences, then we need to marshal the evidence that sort of debunks some of those fears. And I think these can come from many different paths. So I think there is an evidence gap, for example, in understanding the dose response of synthetic fertilizers. And I think Professor Raghuram already mentioned that. And these evidence is scattered all over, and I think there's a need to bring it all together. For example, across South Asia, about 30,000 farms, the CG system found that if you remove 18 kilos of nitrogen per hectare, the yield will not change at all, because the returns to additional nitrogen is already plateaued. And I think we need to bring such evidence to bear, because our automatic thing is don't touch fertilizer, don't touch synthetic fertilizer, because if you do it, your yields are going to fall. Maybe they won't fall even at the beginning, right? I mean, there's a threshold beyond which we need to worry about it. But maybe where the synthetic fertilizers or nitrogen is being overused, you remove some, actually, it's not going to make a difference. So I think we need to have a very nuanced discussion. The same thing, it's linked to food security. If you look at soya bean and cotton, they're also huge users of fertilizers. So it's not as if reducing fertilizer subsidy on inorganic fertilizers is going to harm food security. So I think there is an evidence, I wouldn't say there's a gap, but I think it's scattered and fragmented. And I think we need to pull those together to understand, okay, if we, in the extreme form, let's be radical and say zero subsidies for any fertilizer of any kind. What are we going to look at? What is the extent of the costs or trade-offs or transition costs that we are looking at? So I think that's an evidence gap. The second evidence gap is on the natural farming side and agroecological principles. We understand a couple of things, that they are very context specific, and they are coming upon a system where soil nutrients have already got depleted. So are we to expect that transition to have similar benefits across the board? So we want to understand those implications as well.
Understood.
So I think these two, and there also evidence is emerging, but because obviously there's been less research and it's more recent research, I think we don't understand it fully. So I think that evidence, I think we need to marshal. We can't do new research overnight, but I think we need to bring together that evidence to actually inform our short-term and longer-term discussions. I think
Understood.
there is a lot of agreement on the logic and what we need to do. I think there's less clarity about what the consequences are of biting the bullet and how to do it. I think those are the ones that I think we need to pay attention to going forward.
Got it. I have a follow-up question, but before that, let me quickly summarize for our Hindi-speaking colleagues, and then I'll come to you. डॉक्टर नारायणन कह रही हैं कि दो तरह के एविडेंस की जरूरत है. एक एविडेंस जो फियर्स हैं ट्रांजिशन के, जो पोटेंशियल कुछ मिथ्स भी हैं कि फर्टिलाइजर को हाथ लगाते फूड सिक्योरिटी हमारी रिस्क में आ जाएगी, जो इस तरह के फियर्स को हम टारगेटेड एविडेंस से एड्रेस कर पाए कि ऐसा नहीं है, ऐसा पॉसिबल है कि हम 30% फॉर एग्जांपल फर्टिलाइजर रिड्यूस कर सकते हैं. अक्सर इस तरह का एविडेंस यदि है भी तो स्कैटर्ड है, बहुत टुकड़ों में बटा हुआ है, तो उसको एग्रीगेट करके एक कोहेरेंट नेशनल नैरेटिव किस तरह बनाया जा सकता है, ये एक बात डॉक्टर नारायण ने बताई. और दूसरा ये था अराउंड द फियर्स ऑफ ट्रांजिशन, दूसरा है अराउंड द प्रॉमिस ऑफ एग्रोइकोलॉजी, नेचुरल फार्मिंग, ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग एक्सेट्रा को लेकर जो एविडेंस है उसको भी क्या हम एग्रीगेटेड और नुआंस्ड एविडेंस, टारगेटेड एविडेंस क्या लेकर आ सकते हैं. ये डॉक्टर त्यागी ने ध्यान में दिलाया है. डॉक्टर त्यागी, एक फॉलोअप क्वेश्चन है, इट्स सॉर्ट ऑफ अ थॉट एक्सपेरिमेंट, कि द वे टू मेक पोटेंशियली अ कन्वर्ज एविडेंस जो स्कैटर्ड नहीं है, but also converge in terms of multiple dimensions. जैसे Nachiket was saying कि we need to do something on cropping pattern also, not just simply on fertilizer use and SOC or FUE methods etc. तो यदि हमें मल्टीपल डायमेंशंस पे इंटरवेंशन करनी है सो दैट फर्टिलाइजर डिमांड कम की जा सके, और साथ में हमें फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी रीपर्पसिंग या न्यूट्रल सब्सिडी को डिजाइन करना है, तो आई थिंक अ पॉलिसी सैंडबॉक्स, इमेजिन लाइक इंडिया में 4 डिफरेंट डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स में एक पॉलिसी सैंडबॉक्स किया जाए जिसमें इन सबको इंक्लूड किया जाए, इंक्लूडिंग फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी रीपर्पसिंग एक्सेट्रा. क्या इस तरह के पॉलिसी एंड बॉक्सेस का समय है अभी? बिकॉज दिस ऑल्सो बोल्ड मूव, बट बिकॉज क्राइसिस है तो इस तरह से सोचना चाहिए कहां पर इस तरह के सैंड बॉक्सेस हो सकते हैं, क्या एसेंशियल होगा, इफ यू हैव एनी अर्ली थॉट्स ऑन दैट.
Is that question directed to me? Sorry, you are muted now.
You are muted. You are muted.
Okay, sorry. अभी मैं आवाज आ रही मेरी? तो मैं दोबारा से अपना प्रश्न रखता हूं, डॉक्टर नारायणन. What I was saying,
Yeah,
a popular way to establish evidence and integrate a converged evidence can be doing policy sandboxes. Imagining, 4 districts or 4 blocks in 4 parts of India, where what interventions that, for example, Nachiket was suggesting, कि seed पे भी कुछ करना होगा, we'll have to do something on cropping pattern, we'll have to think of incentive neutralizing, think of neutral incentives, सोचना होगा. तो इस तरह के पॉलिसी सैंडबॉक्सेस क्या एक स्ट्रॉन्ग एविडेंस हो सकते हैं? कहां पे हो सकते हैं? क्या किया जा सकता है इस दिशा में?
Yeah, sorry, because my Hindi is not very good. I didn't know whether you were asking me. But I think we've gone beyond the policy sandbox stage. I don't think we need to restrict it and experiment in a few districts. I think what we understand is that technology, institutions, price-based incentives, all of them have to come together. And at the same time, and at the macro level. I think if you are restricting it to sandboxes in one district or the other, we are tweaking zero. So I think we want a structural shift. We know many things. There is not much we don't know. It's really about getting the pieces together. So I'll stop there. That I think we need to think large and go for a macro shift.
There is a fatigue of pilots and policy sandboxes. You are saying we are ready to do for a more macroeconomic macro shift.
Correct.
Okay.
I feel like a policy sandbox is useful if you don't know what we need to do and you're testing solutions. I think here we all agree, and there's a lot of agreement across the spectrum on the things that we need to do. And so I think we just need to find out how best to do it with the lowest transition costs.
Understood. We are going to go into more conversations. First, let's hear from panelists on the points that were made by each other. And I already see Dr. Donti's hand is up. Dr. Donti, if you have any remarks on the observations made by other panelists. And then we'll open to the audience. There is a list of questions, around 4 synthesized questions that we have. We can get into them. Dr. Donti.
Yeah, I know. I agree with Dr. Sudha that we need to do evidence-based policy transition. But I think again we might be naive in expecting that. Because, just to look at when in 1965, the government brought this green revolution technology, it has not done any assessment of how much fertilizer is required to transit from that condition to a fertilizer dependent agriculture production. Even today, I think the chemical fertilizer supply is not enough, in terms of whatever they are saying. So my point is, government is still irrational, and government is not, the policy is not based on science, and it is completely captured by corporate interest. So whatever solutions are being talked about are basically, hiding those corporate benefits rather than looking at a larger public good and environmentally conscious, management of resources. So I think that in that sense, I think we need to again pile up pressure on the government, because this July, it is the first time the green revolution is being questioned very severely at the field level because of the supply shock. And that I think we need to keep on emphasizing upon, because the transition which we were talking, and which the green revolution technologies also keep saying, there has to be a transition, not a sudden shift. And but then now you are in a situation where you don't have any other choice but to shift. Otherwise, we are going to become more and more import dependent food insecure country. So that's the reason I'm saying we need to, government needs to think more clearly and move like a war room and coordinate with the states. Even today, we are not looking any at any mechanism of
Yeah.
consultation. You mentioned
That point,
GST.
I think, is well taken, Dr. Dunti. I think that is
Yeah,
well
like
understood.
the
Let me
GST you
get
mentioned.
other panelists in, if you allow me. Very quickly, if there is any final remarks, 30 seconds, other panelists. So, Nachiket, if you want to come in.
Yeah, maybe I agree with what the panelists have said. So I just quickly want to make maybe a different point, just to critique that what I feel the government might be very tempted to do, because they have been preparing for this for a long time, is, and some people even mentioned in the comments, link soil health cards with Aadhaar and do DBT of fertilizer subsidy rather than to companies start paying farmers. And I just want to say that this will be a false solution, and we should not go down this path as a solution to this crisis. So I just want to flag this because it didn't come up.
And just for everyone, because it's seriously considered option out there, why is this is a false solution in your opinion? Just reframe that, please.
Yeah, so one issue is, see, the companies want this because there is a perpetual subsidy payment backlog to the companies. Now, the companies with all their clout are not able to get the government to pay on time. So, one is, what is the guarantee the government will start paying farmers on time? That is one. But second, the bigger risk, we have already seen this with even the LPG subsidies. For example, what happened during COVID is that internationally prices went down, the gas prices, and therefore it actually went down below the subsidized price for an LPG cylinder. And the government stopped paying subsidy for LPG cylinders. And subsequently, as the prices rose, the government took a long time to start again subsidizing our LPG cooking gas cylinders. So similar things could start happening even with fertilizer. For example, if this regime being considered was already in place right now, there is a risk that internationally prices go up, the MRP of the chemical fertilizers for the farmers go up, but the government does not increase the subsidy payout proportionally. So
But just coming in there, but any reform would have some risks associated and some benefits associated with it. What I gather from what you're saying is that there are two risks. One, whether DBT will become real. Can we trust whether the payments would really happen to the farmers? That is a risk, and if there is a risk mitigation, maybe worth considering. Second risk is whether in future, when the prices will fluctuate, whether the farmers will be still cushioned. So those are two risks.
and
There
just
a bit of
a third major risk to actually practically doing this is it has to be linked to land records, because even if you have my soil health card data, the fertilizer I need, NPK, will change. If I'm doing potato, I will require a lot more phosphatic fertilizer, lot more DAP. If I'm growing some other crops, say if I'm growing pulses, I won't require nitrogenous fertilizers. So to calculate my subsidy, you need to triangulate the crop I'm growing along with my land, the how much I'm growing it on. So, and land records in India are a mess. And if you start paying based on land
so
records,
effective governance of how much subsidy is given will be very challenging. So I think three important risks identified for a potential solution that may be picked up in short term. And I think that's a great contribution to conversation. Let us move to our participants who have been framing their questions. So I will speak for. I am also worried of time. We have 10 minutes left. I think 10 minutes will definitely go in responding to these questions. My sense is that we will move maybe 7-8 minutes post 4 today as we summarize and then do a vote of thanks. So please bear with us. We'll try to really pace it from here. But these questions deserve clear attention with the patient hearing that our participants have been doing. The first question I am going to read, it's a bit of a synthesis of the questions that have been seen. Integrating health externalities is the topic. Given the growing evidence on the human health impacts of excessive and imbalanced fertilizer use, how can this externality be systematically integrated into fertilizer policy and subsidy design and public health policies while using farmers' livelihoods, while ensuring that farmers' livelihoods remain protected. I think my nudge is that this may be better taken up by Dr. Narayanan, but if anyone else wants to come in, please feel free to. And feel free to let me know if I need to restate it. It was a longish question.
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that. The topic is integrating health externalities. Given the growing evidence on human health impacts of excessive and imbalanced fertilizer use, how can this externality be systematically integrated into fertilizer policy and subsidy design of public health policies? So health externalities हैं, उसको हम narrative और policy design में कैसे ला सकते हैं, while ensuring farmer livelihoods are protected. And quick nudge to my team to also make the synthesis sharper for easy following. Please, back to Dr. Narayan.
Yeah, I think we don't need to bring in health policy as a different dimension. I think it's important from the demand, going back to what Professor Raghunathan mentioned. One is providing farmers and all of them with enough information on the health impacts of the use of any materials. I think pesticides is even more of the case with that. So one is you have standards, product standards that need to be enforced and information to the farmers, and then shape demand. I don't think we should bring in and try to externalize and try to do too much with the
I see Dr. Donti has raised hand and he was also talking about the multiple crises. Maybe health crisis, another one to be added. Dr. Donti, what are you thinking?
Simply because we lack time, we need a food and agriculture policy where we prioritize the food quality rather than talking about just yield and productivity. So there are other things, but I think with the lack of time, I would not go into that.
Understood. Thank you. I will move to the next question. Incentivizing agroecological pathways. Farmers face immediate compounding risks from climate shocks to land fragmentation and income volatility. What incentives, risk-sharing mechanisms, or institutional support can realistically encourage adoption of longer-term agroecological pathways, even if they don't deliver immediate income gains? I will restate if that was too long.
Should I go?
So,
Yes, please. Nachiket, you spoke first. You get the chance.
Now, Narsim Reddy Garu, if you want to go ahead, please go ahead.
Narasimha Garu.
yeah, Nachiket, please go ahead.
Okay. No, so I'm just to say that I had already put it in the chat. I'm putting it again because we need, I think, a comprehensive policy solution, like even Narsim Reddy Garu was just saying, that it has to be food and agriculture. Even health, if you see, our focus on yields means that we are not looking at crop nutrition. There are studies which show that the nutrients we are getting from our crops have been going down on time because we are only focusing on yield and not nutrition, for example. So I think a more comprehensive response is in that link in the chat. But to begin with, I would say certainly right now the policies are excessively skewed in favor of a certain green revolution agricultural paradigm. And to begin with, even if we are not promoting organic or natural, at the very least we need to have a level playing field where it is not being disincentivized.
Understood.
Incentivizing it, at least don't disincentivize it.
Understood. I think Dr. Sudha had lost the connection. I could have recited the question, but I'm also sensing that we are stretched against time. So let me move to the next question. We have got one response from Nachiket. Let's go to the next one. Decentralized and local economies is the topic of the third question that has been framed. What role can decentralized food systems play in closing local nutrient loops and reducing fertilizer dependence? So local systems, local loops, local decentralized food systems, what is their role towards localizing nutrient loops, and reducing fertilizer dependence. How should policy reimagine local economies to support this transition? To the panelists, you may please raise your hand. It's a difficult one, but a very profound one.
No, I think it's a profound question because basically today government is not even thinking of one step. Now that question is asking for a long-term vision. Yeah, but that's what everyone is aspiring, and at least in this panel. So, but how does it happen, and what role it does? It is actually a ameliorative condition, and that's what we are expecting to happen, because when you are interlinking sustainability with local economy, I think we need to change the entire the direction of the economy itself. So there are many things, including change in the budgetary provisions, change in the government policies, several policies, including water, food, agriculture. So I think all those changes. So generally, the words which are used is whole of government and whole of society approaches. I think that for this to happen, the local, production loops. I think we need those whole of government change. And there are many things. I think we don't have time to refer to that.
Next question is on evidence, but maybe I could merge this and the next question. The question was on actually natural farming, its long-term impact. Empirical evidence that NF has reduced consumption of chemical fertilizer in the last 8 to 10 years. I mean, is the question that has this evidence been there? Is the question? Like, I don't understand the question.
Evidence is showing counter trends.
Okay, there was a question mark. Okay, so the evidence is the claim is that the evidence is showing a counterintuitive trend that with adoption of enough, actually the chemical fertilizer consumption is actually increasing. The data shows otherwise, right? How can enough be scaled effectively to reduce fertilizer use in practice? So I think the latter question I will ignore because that has been discussed. So the question the first part of the question to the panelists is that is there a counter evidence in your opinion? If yes, why might that be there, and how do we investigate that? Second, this whole of government and whole of society approach that Dr. Donti was talking about, which is even more difficult when even the current agri policies, as Dr. Donti was saying, was incoherent, potentially lacking targeting and inclusiveness. It's a transformational shift in how we look for create policies. Is there also some need of evidence generation towards this? Just adding that also for panelists to take up on.
I think Sudha is asking to be unmuted.
Okay. This is unfortunate that. Okay, now, but she's still on mute. Oh, yes. No, it was unmuted.
Okay,
Thank
yeah,
you, Dr.
sorry
Narayanan,
about
please.
that. So a couple of things. I think there is I'm currently working on a review of evidence on natural farming, what impacts it has. And it's true that you're not seeing a decline in inorganic fertilizer use over time, even though we know natural farming is spreading. I think part of it, the reason is because the scale of natural farming has not reached those levels where you're seeing those impacts at the macro level on data use. Because micro level evidence is definitely suggesting that if I'm adopting natural farming practices, I do cut back on synthetic fertilizers, if not give it up altogether. So that micro evidence is not translating to macro evidence. But that does not say much about what its impacts are, because even our data on fertilizer use, we know there's a lot of leakage of the fertilizers, if you will, and also going to other countries. So what is recorded as consumption, we don't know if it's being consumed on farms. So I think that's the issue that we have in judging natural farming. The other issue about evidence is that I think many people say that we shouldn't talk about even leaving aside natural farming, the volume of fertilizers that's being used in a farm. We should be focusing on metrics such as agroeconomic efficiency of the fertilizer rather than the total volumes that are being used, because we don't know. There are multiple other reasons for use of fertilizers. Maybe there are changing cropping patterns might crowd in additional use. So I think we need to be careful when we use trends in consumption as a metric for the efficacy or impacts of natural farming.
Thank you for explaining that. For our Hindi-speaking audience, I think I missed a few times to translate. I will do that now. Pardon me for not having done that sufficiently. सॉरी, मुझे माफ कीजिएगा, मैंने पहले एक दो बार मिस किया हिंदी में ट्रांसलेट करना. जो अभी उत्तर दिया है, जो एसेंशियल पार्ट ऑफ जो उत्तर है कि काउंटर एविडेंस क्यों दिख रहा है, उसको मैं पॉइंट हाईलाइट कर देता हूं कि शायद नेचुरल फार्मिंग का स्केल अभी उतना नहीं है कि वो इफेक्ट दिख पाए. और दूसरा, कुछ पोटेंशियल लीकेज है सिस्टम में ऑल्सो, जो फर्टिलाइजर को का मिसयूज भी हो सकता है, जिस वजह से हमें एक्सेसिव यूज ऑफ फर्टिलाइजर अभी भी दिख रहा है. ये एसेंशियल पॉइंट था. जो इशू डॉक्टर दोंती ने जो रिस्पांस दिया था, उसको मैं बता देता हूं कि यदि हमें लोकल लूप्स बनाने हैं, लोकल फूड सिस्टम बनाना है देश में, तो वो बहुत ही मुश्किल टास्क है. वो अभी सिर्फ एग्रीकल्चर में पॉलिसी कोहेरेंस में दिक्कत हो रही है. ये और भी ज्यादा चैलेंजिंग होगा. इसके लिए होल ऑफ गवर्नमेंट, होल ऑफ सोसाइटी अप्रोच ये होगी. सभी को साथ में आना पड़ेगा, पूरी गवर्नमेंट को साथ मानना पड़ेगा, तभी इस तरह की दिशा में बढ़ सकते हैं. अब समय आ चुका है. द टाइम हैज कम टू कंक्लूडेड टू पार्ट कंक्लूजन प्रोसेस. I will first quickly summarize in hopefully in 2-3 minutes what we have discovered today, and then we'll get into a vote of thanks that would be given by Naveen ji. मैं जल्दी से एक बार समराइज करने का कोशिश करता हूं. मैं पहले इंग्लिश में करूंगा और फिर हिंदी में. नहीं, शायद मुश्किल हो जाएगा. समय बचाने के लिए मैं इंग्लिश में करने का प्रयास करता हूं. पहला सेशन जो हमारा था, द फर्स्ट सेशन वाज इन ऑन डायग्नोसिस. उसमें जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट बातें निकल कर आई कि वी वेंट फ्रॉम शिप टू फूड टू शिप टू फर्टिलाइजर सिचुएशन. हमने प्रॉब्लम को बस फूड क्राइसिस या फर्टिलाइजर क्राइसिस में शिफ्ट कर दिया. उसके कारण थे जिस तरह के बीज हमने यूज किए, द सीड्स दैट वी आर यूजिंग इज अ बिग रीजन, क्योंकि वो एक तो फर्टिलाइजर रिस्पांस रेशियो में कम है, दूसरा उनके लिए जो फर्टिलाइजर चाहिए बहुत ज्यादा चाहिए और हमें लगातार इंपोर्ट करना पड़ रहा है. रिफॉर्म्स हुए बट वो फोकस रहे सब्सिडी पर, उनको रिवर्स करना भी मुश्किल रहा. और फिर इसलिए इस तरह के इनिशिएटिव्स जो जिनको रिवर्स करना मुश्किल हो, इनसे बचना होगा एज वी गो हेड. दैट इज अ रिस्क ऑफ ऑल्सो, दैट इज अ रिस्क डायग्नोसिस दैट हैपेंड. मल्टीपल क्राइसिस हैं, ये आइडेंटिफाई किया गया, जिसके अंदर सबसे बड़ा एक इशू जो डॉक्टर दोंती ने आइडेंटिफाई किया कि पॉलिसी डिजाइन जो है वो इनकोहेरेंट है, टारगेटिंग प्रॉपर्ली नहीं है, सभी को इंक्लूड नहीं किया जा रहा है, और ये एक बहुत बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है. इस एनालिसिस में रिस्क ऑफ मिसडायग्नोसिस है यदि हम सिर्फ इसको इंपोर्ट डिपेंडेंस की तरह प्रॉब्लम को समझेंगे, बट ये सिर्फ फर्टिलाइजर इंपोर्ट डिपेंडेंस नहीं, इट इज ऑल्सो अ प्रॉब्लम ऑफ फर्टिलाइजर डिपेंडेंस ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर इन इंडिया, और उसको कैसे रिड्यूस किया जाए फंडामेंटली ये सोचना चाहिए. ये हमारा पहले राउंड का कॉन्वर्सेशन था. दूसरा राउंड में जब हम रिस्पॉन्स नाउ की बात कर रहे थे कि इमीडिएटली हम क्या कर सकते हैं, बिकॉज देयर इज अ रियल क्राइसिस एट आवर डोर्स, शॉर्ट टर्म में क्या कर सकते हैं और क्या नहीं करना चाहिए, अवॉइड करना चाहिए. तो पहला ये आया कि सबसे पहले डिमांड साइड में हमें एफर्ट शुरू करने चाहिए. हमें क्रॉपिंग पैटर्न चेंज करने होंगे. लेग्यूम्स को डेफिनेटली लाना है बियॉन्ड सोयाबीन. ये बहुत बड़ा एक इनिशिएटिव है. इससे फर्टिलाइजर की खपत सीधा कम हो सकती है एक ही सीजन में लगभग 70% तक. ये डॉक्टर रघुराम ने ध्यान में दिलाया. सेकंड सजेशन वाज कि इस पर रिस्पॉन्स एक हाईएस्ट लेवल कमिटी, वेरी हाई लेवल कमिटी को करना चाहिए, जिसमें पीएम खुद पार्टिसिपेट करें, जिसको आइडियली जितना हो सके विदाउट क्रिएटिंग पैनिक ट्रांसपेरेंट कम्युनिकेशन करना चाहिए, सो दैट वी कैन यूज द अदर एजेंट्स इन द सिस्टम टू सॉल्व एंड कम कोलैबोरेटिवली. बाकी लोगों को जानकारी रहेगी तो शायद वो भी कंट्रीब्यूट कर पाए, पर एक लिमिटेड कम्युनिकेशन ऑब्वियसली होना चाहिए. तीसरा इंपॉर्टेंट एरिया निकल कर आया था कि हम किस तरह से ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन से दूर ले जाने वाले जो इन्वेस्टमेंट्स हैं उन पर हम कैसे कर सकते हैं, जो अक्सर सॉइल हेल्थ पे फोकस करें. किस तरह से हम एनएफ, नेचुरल फार्मिंग, ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग, कंपोस्ट मिशन में जो इनिशिएटिव्स हैं उनको भी सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं. क्या हम वो पैसा जो फर्टिलाइजर के लिए हाईलाइटेड है, एलोकेटेड है, क्या उसको हम इस दिशा में ला सकते हैं. एनडीडीबी के इन्वेस्टमेंट्स का जिक्र हुआ, किस तरह से बायोमास, बायोस्लरी, बायोचार एंड अदर बायो रिसोर्स सेंटर्स आर इमर्जिंग इन द कंट्री, क्या उनको सपोर्ट किया जा सकता है. सब्सिडी को न्यूट्रल यदि बनाया जाए, इनपुट केमिकल इनपुट से लिंक हटाकर यदि न्यूट्रल बना दिया जाए तो इन सब दिशाओं में इन्वेस्टमेंट जाने लगेगा. क्या अवॉइड करना होगा, उसमें ध्यान में आया that those solutions that only push for an input, a technology or a particular product, उनको थोड़ा सावधानी से लेना चाहिए. And we should really focus on those methods that and those strategies that focus on outcomes. Soil health पे जिसका directly ज्यादा impact हो रहा है उनको हमें prioritize करना चाहिए. ये बहुत ही clearly निकल कर आया. और ये भी निकल कर आया कि political economy यहाँ पर काफी entrenched है. उसको अनपैक करना बहुत जरूरी होगा, क्योंकि पास में रिपोर्ट्स आई हैं, पास में भी सॉल्यूशंस आए हैं, पर वो पॉलिटिकल कैपिटल होना इंपॉर्टेंट है टू मूव अहेड. अभी क्राइसिस की सिचुएशन है, तो किस तरह की कोलैबोरेटिव मल्टी मिनिस्ट्रियल एक्शन से हम सही दिशा में बढ़ सकते हैं. राउंड 3 में जब हम लॉन्ग टर्म ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन की बात कर रहे थे, वहां पर निकल कर आया कि अगेन डिमांड शिफ्ट यानी क्रॉपिंग पैटर्न एक शिफ्ट बहुत बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट ऑफ स्ट्रैटेजी होगा. फर्टिलाइजर को बेसल सॉल्यूशन डोज की जगह टॉप अप डोज की तरह देखना वुड बी एन इंपॉर्टेंट इनिशिएटिव, एंड उसके लिए जो करना है. एंड ये जो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन है वो मल्टी डायमेंशनल है, सीड्स, क्रॉप्स, क्रॉपिंग पैटर्न एंड फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी, तीनों डायमेंशन से वर्क करना होगा. एंड बाद में नहीं, और इस दिशा में जो एविडेंस है उसमें अब रिमूविंग द फियर ऑफ ट्रांजिशन एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एविडेंस होगा. ये स्कैटर्ड है, इसको एग्रीगेट करना होगा, और नेचुरल फार्मिंग एटसेट्रा के लिए भी जो एविडेंस है उसको हमें एग्रीगेट और नुआंस्ड करना होगा, सो दैट कॉन्फिडेंस एंड प्रॉमिस कैन बी एस्टैब्लिश्ड फॉर देम. एक रिस्क जो आइडेंटिफाई किया लास्ट में जो नचिकेत ने, कि डीबीटी जैसे सॉल्यूशन जो आ रहे हैं उनको जब लाएं तो ध्यान में रखे जाएं, और जो भी सॉल्यूशन लाए उसमें ध्यान में रखा जाए कि वो सॉल्यूशन रियल है या नहीं. क्या डीबीटी finally can we trust they will transfer the money to the farmers effectively, consistently. Second, kahin par struggling with my own handwriting. हाँ, फ्यूचर में जब प्राइसिंग फ्लक्चुएशंस होंगे तो उन प्राइसिंग फ्लक्चुएशंस के बीच में क्या फार्मर्स को क्वेश्चन किया जाएगा या नहीं, एंड ये आइडेंटिफाई करना है कितना अमाउंट ऑफ डीबीटी होना चाहिए. That would be a governance challenge. With that, let me close the summary. This was a very, very enriching conversation, and I believe this is just a beginning. We will need to come back and keep on building, because the situation is real, it is evolving, and we need to be much more proactive. And thank you, all the panelists from my side, for joining this one. I will hand it over to Narendra ji from NCNF. To deliver the vote of thanks. Narendra ji.
Afternoon, everybody. It was such a fascinating discussion, and it's a very great, nicely summarized and moderated by Apurva. Really enjoyed it, and it was really interesting to listen to the multiple points of view. So from NCNF side also, let me express my deep happiness for having co-hosted this webinar along with Apurva and Bhamini and colleagues in CEW. So I think the discussion was extremely useful, and the conversation today has reminded us that we cannot solve this issue of this impending or this immediate crisis that we have faced by only looking at the visible symptoms. We need to address the root causes in the the shortage of fertilizers. As they say, in any crisis, there are the predisposing factors and the precipitating factors. So this war and devastation crisis is just a precipitating factor that has led to a shortage of fertilizers. But there are much more predisposing factors. And the issue of reducing dependence on fertilizers is not just about reducing the import dependence, but is actually reducing dependence on fertilizers per se. So how do we actually transition gradually, quickly, however soon we can, into ways and methodologies where we actually reduce and gradually at some point of time eliminate the consumption of fertilizers. So I think that is the direction in which we need to move, and there's a crying need now to actually move towards the non-chemical fertilizer paradigm, because we're not just talking about productivities and prices, etc. We're also talking about soil health. You're talking about human and animal health. We're talking about climate resilience. So there are much larger issues that we're trying to address here. Therefore, I think this need for shift to the more agroecological means was very, very it's very, very eminently highlighted by each of the panelists. And as they say, there is आपदा में अवसर है. माने इस crisis में actually there are opportunities, which I think each panel is very nicely summarized by Apurva. I'm not going to get into the details, but there are various immediate, maybe what can we do in Kharif 26, what can we do in the next couple of years, and what can we actually do in the longer term. There were suggestions which came out very interestingly. So I think each of us have taken away a lot of lessons. So I would like to express my vote of thanks at this point of time. First, my sincere thanks to our panelists, Dr. Raghuram, Dr. Sudha Narayanan, Dr. Narasimha Reddy, and Nachiket Udupa. Been extremely fascinated listening to your very, very expert views and opinions. We have given us at least able to allow us to conceptualize and put this problem in a perspective with this very, very diverse set of inputs that we received. Thank you so much. I also love to express my thanks to Apurva, who very, very efficiently, in fact, we were not very late when we just for 15 minutes here and there. So we started also a little bit late. So very efficiently conducted the whole discussion, but concurrently summarizing. So it was a very good way of actually educating the audience as well. So very well done, Apurva. Thank you so much. And so we are very happy as NCNF, as I said, to be co-organizer with CEEW in this event. And so I'm extremely thankful to the Sustainable Food System team at the CEEW, particularly Bhamini on the screen, and then Nikita, who was in the backstage, and many others. I mean, there are a team of 40 people, so I can't name all of them, but thank you so much being with us. From the NCNF side, I think Anjul and Reena played a very important role in actually helping put it all together. So I thank them. Thank you to all the participants who stayed on till the end and really enlightened us with your questions, thoughts, and continuous engagement on the chat box. I couldn't even manage to read most of what was written there because it was so fast and, active. So thanks, everyone. I think this is, as Apurva summarized, this is just the beginner of the conversations. I think through the next few months and next couple of years, we would be engaging on this, along with NCNF and CW, we would be engaging in this topic and many other topics around it, agroecology and, environment more and more regularly. So thanks everybody, to the speakers, to the participants, the organizers. We hope to continue these conversations. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all. And here is the entire team thanking you again.
Thank you.
That's a lovely sight. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
You want to say something?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,